Welcome to the Federal Nonpoint Source Order Training from the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. To begin, please click Continue. Upon completion of all modules and passing each examination, each participant will be provided a certification document. It is the responsibility of the permittee to maintain training and certification records with project documents in preparation of an audit. Unit 1. Federal Nonpoint Source Permit Requirements and Pertinent Regulations. To begin, please click the Continue button. Welcome to Unit 1, Introduction to Pertinent Regulations. This is the first of 8 units in this training program. In this unit, you will be introduced to the Federal Nonpoint Source Permit, or NPS permit, focusing on federal and state clean water laws, with a specific emphasis on California's regulatory environment. This unit examines key policies and acts, including the Federal Clean Water Act, or CWA, the California Porter Cologne Water Quality Control Act, and California's 2004 Nonpoint Source policies. This unit addresses the regulatory background of California's NPS policy and the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, or Central Valley Water Board, CVRWQCB's basin plans. You will review Best Management Practice, or BMP, guidance documents related to permit compliance and non-point source issues from the U.S. Forest Service, or USFS National Core BMP guidance, and the Best Management Practices for Water Quality Bureau of Land Management California September 2022 guide, as well as the Pacific Watershed Associates Ranch and Rural Road Handbook. The order section titled Training and Certification Program outlines important distinctions of this training and the ensuing certification. Anyone conducting actions or submitting documents required by the order must be or work directly under a certified individual. Not all permittee staff are required to obtain and maintain certification. What is non-point source, or NPS, pollution? Put simply, NPS is any water pollution that does not originate from a single source. More formally, NPS is a term for any water pollution that does not meet the Clean Water Act definition of point source in Section 502, subsection 14. NPS pollution can enter waterways through runoff from mines, agricultural sites, urban developments, and forest landscape. The goal of the federal NPS permit is to reduce pollution stemming from specific permitted activities on USFS and Bureau of Land Management, or BLM, lands. Next, let's explore some applicable federal and state laws. The Federal Clean Water Act and California's Porter Cologne Water Quality Control Act provide the overarching regulatory framework for protecting water quality in California. These laws call for developing statewide and regional basin plans that set water quality standards and targets. The state's NPS policy outlines a blueprint for managing NPS pollution through basin plan implementation. Further, these laws establish the State Water Resource Control Board, or State Water Board's authority to regulate discharges of waste on private, state-owned, and federally owned lands in the state of California. Execution of these core state and federal regulations requires continuing action. The NPS policy needs updated implementation plans and dedicated funding. Basin plans are kept current with regular reviews, incorporating new science and policies like statewide biological integrity objectives. Partners collaborate across programs on integrated, accountable implementation of basin plan actions to achieve clean water goals. Ongoing investment, oversight, and adaptive management will fulfill the vision of these foundational water quality laws and policies. To learn more about each item, click the links below. Let's begin our discussion with the Federal Clean Water Act, also referred to as CWA. The Clean Water Act establishes the basic structure for regulating pollution in United States, or U.S. waters. It gives Americans a right to waterways that are clean, biologically intact, and safe for use, and includes an array of protections and programs to reach that goal. In 1987, Congress added Section 319 to the Clean Water Act, which requires states to develop United States Environmental Protection Agency, or US EPA-approved non-point source management programs to reduce non-point source pollution. The State Water Resources Control Board, or State Water Board, SWRCB, manages the California NPS program, including several waste discharge requirement, or WDR, permits for activities on private, state, and federal lands. The Clean Water Act authorizes the State Water Board to implement new NPS programs and reinforces the existing policy and framework, allowing the board to adapt WDR permits to meet policy goals. Let's discuss the origins of the Port Cologne Water Quality Control Act. The State Assembly asked a panel of industrial, agricultural, and state and local government members to report on needed revisions to existing water quality laws. In 1969, the state legislature enacted the Port Cologne Water Quality Control Act, the cornerstone of today's water protection efforts in California. Let's discuss the Port Cologne Act. The Port Cologne Act established the State Water Board and 9 regional water quality control boards, or regional boards, RWQCBs. The regional water boards are based on hydrogeologic barriers. These entities are charged with implementing its provisions and which have primary responsibility for protecting water quality in California. The regional water boards regulate discharges under the Port Cologne Act, primarily through issuance of National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permits for point source discharges, and waste discharge requirements for non-point source discharges. The Port Cologne Act also requires adoption of water quality control plans, or WQCPs, that contain the guiding policies of water pollution management in California. Anyone discharging or proposing to discharge materials that could affect water quality must file a report of waste discharge. The State Water Board and the regional boards can make their own investigations or may require dischargers to carry out water quality investigations and report on water quality issues. The Port Cologne Act provides several options for enforcing WDRs and other orders, including cease and desist orders, cleanup and abatement orders, administrative civil liability orders, civil court actions, and criminal prosecutions. Next, let's take a step back and explore the end goal, the driving objective behind these legislative efforts, which is beneficial uses. State law defines beneficial uses of California's waters that may be protected against quality degradation to include and not be limited to domestic, municipal, agricultural, and industrial supply, power generation, recreation, aesthetic enjoyment, navigation, and preservation and enhancement of fish, wildlife, and other aquatic resources or preserves. Water Code Section 13050 Section F. 2 significant examples which are often assigned together include cold freshwater habitat, cold. Uses of water that support cold water ecosystems including, but not limited to, preservation or enhancement of aquatic habitats, vegetation, fish, or wildlife, including invertebrates. Spawning, reproduction, and/or early development, SPWN. Uses of water that support high-quality aquatic habitats suitable for reproduction and early development of fish. As stated earlier, the Port Cologne Act requires adoption of water quality control plans that contain the guiding policies of water pollution management in California. A number of statewide water quality control plans have been adopted by the State Water Board. In addition, regional water quality control plans, also referred to as basin plans, have been adopted by each of the regional water boards and are updated as necessary and practical. These plans identify the existing and potential beneficial uses of waters of the state and establish water quality objectives to protect these uses. The basin plans also contain implementation, surveillance, and monitoring plans. Statewide and regional water quality control plans include enforceable prohibitions against certain types of discharges, including those that may pertain to non-point sources. In association with the NPS program mentioned earlier, the State Water Board regularly maintains implementation plans. You can explore more of the Non-Point Source Pollution (NPS) control program, plans and policy site linked on this page and also found in the Unit 1 Resources document. Water quality objectives and water quality concerns are two terms that you will want to know. Click on each term below to learn more. In the next few slides, you will find 3 different basin maps. The first is the Sacramento Basin. It ranges from Yolo County in the south to Modoc County at the Oregon border. The next basin map is the San Joaquin Basin, which has a range from Fresno County in the south to Sacramento County in the north. On the next slide, you will find the Tulare Lake Basin, which has a range from Kern County in the south to Fresno County in the north, predominantly Kings, Cahuilla, and Kern watersheds. On the following slide, you will find an interactive California Basin Plan Mapping Project map. It is the main tool for accessing the project's dataset. It is a clickable, zoomable map that allows the user to select a water body and display the beneficial uses in a pop-up window or download in a tabular format. Next, you will review legislation that is relevant to this training. Click each item to learn more. On this slide, you will find a timeline depicting the many changes in laws and regulations aimed at protecting water quality over a span of 50 years. Determining water jurisdiction is complex and beyond the scope of this training. Participants are expected to understand that protections for waters of the U.S. and waters of the state extend far beyond navigable rivers and lakes. NPS permit requirements are applicable to waters of the state and waters of the U.S. to ensure that water quality protection occurs throughout the hydrologic region. The term waters of the U.S. is one that you will want to be familiar with. As the definition of waters of the U.S. changes, you will also want to stay abreast of updates. The table on this page shows the recent revisions to the January 2023 amendments of the definition. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, or USACE, Sacramento District maintains an online geographic information system, or GIS, map of traditional navigable waters of the U.S., but many more non-traditional water features are protected by the ruling. These protections of jurisdictional waters form the foundation for water pollution prevention regulations. The number of wetland definitions contained in state law for planning and regulatory purposes has expanded significantly over the years. The term waters of the state is an attempt to capture all the various aquatic resources regulated by numerous state agencies. It includes rivers, streams, lakes, wetlands, mudflats, vernal pools, and other aquatic sites. There have been attempts to codify a single state of California definition of wetlands that could be used by all state agencies. However, this has not been achieved to date. Each agency is bound by their laws, regulations, and policy. Each maintains their own definition of a wetland. This next section provides a brief summary of different categories of BMPs, as well as USFS and BLM reference documents accepted by both industry and regulators. BMPs for water quality. Methods, measures, or practices selected by an agency to meet its non-point source pollution control needs. BMPs include, but are not limited to, structural and non-structural controls and operation and maintenance procedures. BMPs can be applied before, during, and after pollution-producing activities to reduce or eliminate the introduction of pollutants into receiving waters. Different agencies define and categorize BMPs differently. For the purposes of this training, we divide BMPs into physical and procedural controls. On the next few slides, you will find videos that address the physical and procedural controls. Physical BMPs can include structural controls, for example, constructing rolling dips in a roadway to disperse runoff flows. Physical BMPs can include non-structural controls, for example, planting woody species in the vicinity of a culvert outlet. Procedural BMPs can include operational procedures, for example, scheduling recurring inspections of a watercourse crossing after runoff events. Procedural BMPs can include maintenance procedures, for example, preparing to conduct maintenance of a watercourse crossing at recurring intervals. In 2012, the USFS published a national guide to consolidate and supplement local guidance documents and programs nationwide. This technical guide is the first volume of guidance for the USFS National BMP Program. The USFS National BMP Program was developed to improve agency performance and accountability in managing water quality consistent with the Federal Clean Water Act and state water quality programs. Current USFS policy directs compliance with required Clean Water Act permits and state regulations, and requires the use of BMPs to control NPS pollution to meet applicable water quality standards and other Clean Water Act requirements. In everyday language, both USFS policy and this BMP guide were developed to support federal land managers' compliance with state water quality permits. USFS National Core BMPs are grouped into 11 resource categories. 9 of those directly relate to water quality and forest activities covered under the order and are detailed further in the following slides. The remaining 2, general planning and minerals management, do not directly relate to activities covered under the order and are not covered in this training. Aquatic ecosystems. Projects with potential to impact water bodies. Chemical use. Use of any chemicals that may pollute water resources. Facilities and non-recreation special uses. Heavy development such as utilities, buildings, and waste management. Wildland fire. Prevention and active management of fires. Rangeland. Herd management and structural improvements on a grazed landscape. Recreation. Manage light and heavy recreational usage of lands and water bodies by humans, livestock, and equipment, or vehicles. Road. Supports road and automotive service or support infrastructure. Vegetation. Mechanical vegetation management projects. Water uses. Surface and groundwater development and management. USFS National Core Technical Guide. The full guide can be reviewed online or downloaded for your use. In 2000, the USFS published the Water Quality Management for National Forest System Lands in California Best Management Practices Guidebook. In 2010, the USFS published an amended version of the same handbook with minor updates to the BMPs. This guidebook provides water quality-specific BMPs for many overlapping work activities. On this and the next slide, you can review each by clicking on the title. After you review each item, the Continue button will appear. Click each handbook title. This is a continuation of information and resources for you. Please click each item to learn more. Another important set of resources comes from the BLM. They have developed handbooks for implementing policies and directions described in the BLM manual sections. These handbooks provide specific, detailed instructions, techniques, procedures, practices, and processes. On the next slide, you will find an overview and links to long-standing environmental management handbooks and the 2022 NPS BMP handbook. Click each handbook title for more information as well as a link to the online resource. Links to the full handbooks can also be found in the Unit 1 Resources document. The BLM's statewide plan was developed to address National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA requirements for fuels reductions projects on California-administered BLM lands. Although the program targets fuels reduction activities, the statewide plan includes largely the same activities, concerns, and mitigation measures as the state NPS program and USFS BMP guidance document. The link to the full plan is found at the bottom of this page, and you are invited to review it for a deeper understanding of the plan. On this page, you will find the map of the action areas identified in the statewide fuels treatment project spanning the BLM field offices within Central Valley Regional Board jurisdiction. A link to the online document is found at the bottom of this page. In addition to the formal specific guidance documents presented so far, the following resources provide beneficial reference information and tools that cover the wide range of activities covered by the federal NPS permit. Links to each of these resources can also be found in the Unit 1 Resources document. The next few slides provide a brief summary of the two state-sponsored guidance documents and actively maintained state and federal online resource centers. The Rural Roads Handbook is a practical guide and field manual, providing general guidelines for developing and maintaining a single forest, ranch, rural road, or an entire wildland road access system. Units 6 and 7 of this training program will expand on several chapters within this document, detailing design and assessment tasks expected of participants to maintain permit compliance. A link to the full handbook is found at the bottom of this page. The next resource introduced here is the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, or CAL FIRE, Watercourse Crossings Guidebook, which focuses only on watercourse crossings. In Units 6 and 7, we will cover relevant topics from this guidebook more in depth. Topics include considerations for crossings in post-fire environments, approaches to address high-risk crossings with large fills, methodologies for designing rock-armored crossings, including how to size rock riprap to withstand overtopping 100-year flood flows, and considerations for permanent bridge design in forested watersheds. A link to the full document can be found at the bottom of this page. On this page, you find some additional online resources. Please click each title to view the description. Links to each source are found within the descriptions and also found within the Unit 1 Resources document. This unit provided a legislative summary of water quality regulations in California and applicable federal BMP guidance documents. The following 4 units will provide a summary of the federal NPS permit, including pollutants of concern, an overview of activities covered, and monitoring and reporting requirements. Unit 2, Federal Nonpoint Source Order Components and Requirements. To begin, please click Continue. Welcome to Unit 2, Federal Nonpoint Source Order Components and Requirements. In this unit, you will be introduced to the order and learn about the major components. The purpose of the order is to ensure protection and restoration of the waters of the state from NPS pollution resulting from activities conducted by the United States Forest Service, or USFS, and Bureau of Land Management, or BLM, on federal lands within the Central Valley region of California. This order does not serve as a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES order, or water quality certification under the Clean Water Act. Discharges subject to these requirements must obtain separate permits. The order contains requirements necessary to ensure the protection and restoration of the beneficial uses of the waters of the state from NPS pollution. On this slide, you will find resources related to the order. Please click the link at the bottom to access the Central Valley Regional Board's Forest Activities Program. From that webpage, you can find and download the order and all attachments. The order and all attachments are also available in the Unit 2 Resources and References document. Prohibitions of the order. Permittee must not create a condition of pollution, contamination, or nuisance, as defined by Water Code Section 13050. Permittee must not cause or contribute to an exceedance of any applicable state or federal water quality criteria. Permittee must not discharge waste classified as hazardous as defined in California Code of Regulations, CCR, Title 22, Section 66261.1, and the following. Permittee must not cause or contribute to exceedance in receiving waters of any applicable basin plan water quality objective. The discharge of any waste not specifically regulated by this order is prohibited. See exceptions for details. The following are standard provisions of the order. This order shall not create a vested right to discharge waste to waters of the state. USFS projects enrolled under the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, or Central Valley Regional Board. CVRW QCB's Waste Discharge Requirements, or WDR, General Order for Discharges related to timberland management activities for non-federal and federal lands. Order R5-2017-0061. May proceed under the conditions of that order until August 15, 2025. Permittee must allow Central Valley Regional Board staff reasonable access onto properties covered by this order. This order is effective upon adoption by the Central Valley Regional Board as of December 13, 2024. If discharge events are observed to threaten or exceed basin plan water quality objectives, permittee must notify the Central Valley Regional Board. No part of the order shall be interpreted to violate the Anti-Deficiency Act, 31 United States Code, or USC, Section 1341. Order Attachment A defines many commonly used terms and acronyms used throughout the order and this training. For your reference, a quick guide is provided with the Unit 2 Resources and References document. This quick guide contains tips about order sections and explanations of terms and phrases from the order. In this section, covered land management activities are addressed. The following land management activities have the potential to discharge waste that may adversely affect the condition of water quality or impact beneficial uses of the receiving waters and are subject to this order: vegetation management, transportation management, recreation facilities management, post-emergency recovery activities, and restoration activities. Land management activities examples. Please note, the locations, projects, descriptions, and maps presented in this section are hypothetical representations created solely for educational and illustrative purposes. They are not intended to be used, referenced, or interpreted as actual sites, locations, or real-world proposals in any official documentation, permit applications, or professional submissions. Click each image to learn more. Vegetation management is defined as actions taken to manage vegetation to restore and maintain the health, resiliency, and productivity across federal lands. Vegetation management activities covered under this order include commercial and non-commercial timber harvest, including non-emergency post-wildfire operations, prescribed burning, mastication of fuels, pesticide use, or other means to meet vegetation management objectives. The Green Acres Project is a theoretical example of a vegetation management project on the Tahoe National Forest. Proposed treatments would potentially improve habitat health, reduce competition, and increase resilience to disturbance including insect infestation, disease, drought, and uncharacteristic wildfire. This theoretical map provides a potential base map for permittees to add road names, watercourse classification, and inventoried controllable sediment discharge sources, or CSDS. Transportation management is defined as actions taken to manage motorized and non-motorized road and trail networks serving multiple uses across federal lands. Transportation management activities may include the construction, reconstruction, maintenance, or decommissioning of roads or trails, and associated watercourse crossings. The Lava Roads Repair Project is a theoretical example of a transportation management project on the Shasta Trinity National Forest. Proposed transportation improvements would establish a minimum transportation system that would potentially improve public safety, allow long-term access to recreation, special uses, and management sites, and decrease maintenance needs and costs. Recreation facilities management is defined as actions taken to meet multiple use objectives such as providing recreational opportunities for the public including construction, maintenance, and management of recreation facilities such as campgrounds, staging areas or parking lots, off-highway vehicle areas, and managed recreation sites. The Oak Grove Recreation Site Decommissioning Project is a theoretical example of a recreation project on the Shasta Trinity National Forest. Proposed project activities would include demolition of the two buildings, including removal and disposal of the materials. This would potentially improve public safety in the area. Click each image to learn more. Post-emergency recovery is defined as activities taken after emergency actions have ceased and recovery activities have begun in response to flooding, landslides, severe storm damage, wildfire, or other emergencies, and where National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA assessment, has been completed, including NEPA exemptions and categorical exclusions. Operations conducted as part of post-emergency recovery activities can include, but are not limited to, implementation of erosion and sediment controls, temporary watercourse crossing installation and removal, permanent watercourse crossing repair or replacement, timber salvage, hazard tree removal, revegetation activities, and pesticide application. The Post-Disturbance Hazardous Tree Management Project is a theoretical example of a post-emergency project, permitted as a bundle of activities across multiple national forests. The project areas were heavily impacted by the wildfires of 2020 and 2021. Proposed project activities would potentially include hazardous tree abatement adjacent to roads, trails, and facilities within national forests affected by wildfire. Although this theoretical project would span across multiple HUC 12 watersheds, this map provides a good example of what a single standalone unit may look like for a permitted project. Restoration is defined as actions taken to improve, enhance, or sustain ecological health on federal lands. These activities are restorative in nature and are often designed to improve habitat, prevent degradation, and reduce long-term erosion and sedimentation to surface waters. Restoration activities may include watercourse crossing removal, channel and bank stabilization, stream channel and floodplain habitat enhancement, and wetland restoration. The Concow Resilience Project is a theoretical example of a restoration project on the Plumas National Forest. The project area, Concow Basin, experienced high-severity fire in 2018. Proposed project activities would potentially include hand-cut and pile brush, burn brush piles, plant trees in the ground, plant bunchgrass seed or plugs, masticate brush, prune resprouting oaks, dig fire lines by hand, and hand spray herbicides. The order recognizes that in the event of an emergency, such as wildfire and flooding, permittees may take immediate and necessary actions to protect human life and property on the lands they manage. Such actions may result in immediate or threatened discharges of waste to water bodies. This order does not specifically condition those activities. Permittees are required to monitor these locations afterwards and annually summarize water quality impacts resulting from emergency response activities, as detailed in Order Attachment B, the MRP. In this section, you will learn more about the order's prohibitions, provisions, and components. The order has two main components: project-level coverage and watershed-level coverage via Controllable Sediment Source Reduction Program, or CSSRP. Project-level coverage consists of two categories. Category A projects have little to no ground disturbance. Category B projects have a higher likelihood of impacting sensitive resources. This order also requires implementation of a CSSRP and associated Watershed Treatment Plan, or WTP, to abate ongoing discharges or threatened discharges of sediment to waters of the state in a systematic manner over time. This order applies a programmatic approach to promote a more efficient workflow by leveraging existing BLM and USFS mandates, and by reducing the workload associated with more traditional permits. Category A projects are those that typically include activities that result in no or minimal ground disturbance to areas that have the potential for hydrologic connection to surface waters and meet Category A eligibility criteria. Projects meeting these criteria are automatically enrolled in the order, and the permittee must conduct required annual federal agency monitoring and reporting obligations. Keysville and Chimney Peak Roads maintenance is a theoretical transportation management project that conforms. Category B projects are those projects that pose an increased risk of causing or contributing to exceedances of water quality objectives and typically include ground disturbing operations that may cause disruption to soils, road drainage, riparian zones, and/or watercourse and lake protection zones, and are near or have the potential to be hydrologically connected to surface waters. Projects meeting Category B criteria require additional planning and information gathering, including the submittal of a Notice of Planned Operations, or NPO, for each year that the project is active. Building on the vegetation management example presented earlier, the Green Acres project is a theoretical example of a Category B project on the Tahoe National Forest. Proposed activities would include mechanized and aerial vegetation treatments, prescribed burning, and fungicide treatments. This map depicts the theoretical work areas in proximity to minor and major rivers within the watershed. Due to the proximity to watercourses, this project potentially fulfills Category B attributes. The second or watershed level component of this order requires the permittee to develop and implement a measurable CSSRP. The order recognizes that the United States Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management together manage a significant portion of lands within the Central Valley region. This includes areas encompassing California's source watersheds that support both the State Water Project and the federal Central Valley Project. The order considers the permittee's limitations and the infeasibility of treating all sediment discharge sources at once. It instead requires the permittee to develop and implement a measured CSSRP. The purpose of the CSSRP is to identify and abate actual or threatened discharges of waste to receiving waters in Targeted Hydrologic Unit Code, or HUC 12 watersheds over time. The Monitoring and Reporting Program, MRP, Attachment B of this order, is necessary to determine if projects comply with all conditions required. The executive officer may review, modify, reissue the MRP, or issue site-specific developed requirements at any time. The monitoring and reporting requirements for both components of the order will be explained further in Modules 3, 4, and 5. Unit 3, Federal Nonpoint Source Order Category Coverage and Implementation. To begin, please click Continue. Welcome to Unit 3. This unit presents the requirements and deliverables for the two main components of order coverage. The two components of the order include the project level and the watershed levels. Emergency response activities are not directly covered under the order. There are two categories that individual projects may fall under: Category A projects pose a low threat to water quality and typically include activities that result in no or minimal ground disturbance near surface waters. Category B projects pose a greater threat to water quality and have greater monitoring and reporting requirements. Building on the Keysville Chimney Peaks project example presented in Unit 2, this theoretical Category A project presents a low threat. The theoretical site maps depict a large project area, but this could still be considered a single project under the order. Although there would be cumulatively lots of ground disturbance across dozens of road miles, none would be near surface waters. Building on the Greenacres project example presented in Unit 2, this theoretical Category B project presents a greater threat to water quality. This project has a smaller area than Keysville Chimney Peaks. However, the proposed activities would potentially traverse multiple watercourses. Additionally, pesticide application could introduce new pollutants and greater threats than only sediment delivery. Component 2 is the Controllable Sediment Source Reduction Program, or CSSRP, that assesses conditions and prioritizes greater threat sites across a hydrologic unit code, or HUC, 12 watershed. CSSRP was introduced in Unit 2 and will be detailed further in Unit 4 and Unit 5. This section focuses on the enrollment and data requirements for the different categories. Monitoring information was introduced in Unit 2 and will be covered more in detail in Unit 4. The list below highlights some of the important requirements from the General Conditions section of the order. Follow NEPA requirements. Comply with agency-specific BMP requirements. All persons responsible for permit activities shall maintain training certificates. Use adaptive management. Modify BMPs to meet water quality objectives. Follow monitoring and reporting requirements in the order. Retain records for all permitted activities for at least 5 years after project completion. Take a look at adaptive management condition. Adaptive management is an important concept within the order. Adaptive management is building in appropriate feedback loops to judge success of measures and revise or amend as necessary to achieve success. Category A projects that have approved NEPA documentation and pose a low threat to water quality and the beneficial uses of water of the state are automatically covered under the order, and a submittal of an NPO is not required. Category A projects are required to fulfill monitoring requirements determined or dictated by their agency. However, if broadcast or aerial application of pesticides is planned, this specific activity requires a notification. Pesticide application proposals and notifications will be described in more detail in Unit 4. For annual reports, Category A activities only need to identify the locations of active Category A projects in the active project list submitted. Category A activities are subject to discharge incident reporting requirements, the same as Category B and CSSRP. If a discharge incident fulfills the definition of a CSDS, this initiates all the CSDS requirements, even in a Category A project area. The discharge area will require the CSDS inventory map and table, same as the Category B requirements. For Category B activities, the NPO can be considered a 1-year work plan or work clearance. Permittees submit an NPO annually and within 15 days of commencing project activities. Note that NPOs for post-emergency recovery activities have different submission requirements. A map identifying the NEPA project area, proposed treatment area for that year, roads within the NEPA project area, CSDS sites, watercourses, and water drafting locations should be submitted with the NPO. The NPO document itself will identify the landowning agency and point of contact for any and all project activities planned. The project description will include descriptions of proposed activities, acreages, schedules, and water protection measures. Additionally, the NPO must include CSDS information or an explanation why CSDS information is unavailable. Controllable Sediment Discharge Source, or CSDS, is an order-specific term describing a location or site that presents risk to water quality. CSDS are targets for treatment activities under this order. To qualify as a CSDS, a location must meet all of the following conditions. Causes or threatens to cause impact to water quality. Caused or affected by anthropogenic activity. Under permittee's control and is treatable through management measures or BMPs. An example CSDS map is presented here. The Yuba project serves as a more complex project with a relatively large NEPA planning area, or project boundary. Sitting at just over 14,500 acres, it proposed multiple potential land management activities to meet agency objectives such as vegetation management, transportation management, recreation facilities management, and restoration activities. CSDS are the potential contaminant sources related to covered activities. As an example, covered activities occurring on a sloped surface may have the potential to deposit sediment downslope from the project area if the proper BMPs and sediment control systems are not in place. There can be lots of CSDS within a proposed project area, more than can be treated in an operating season. This order acknowledges the permittee's limitations in treating all CSDS at once. Instead, this order requires that the permittee develop and implement a measured controllable sediment source reduction program, CSSRP, to track and manage sediment discharge sources. More detail will be provided on CSSRP later. For now, we focus on CSDS-specific requirements in Category B projects. There are 3 steps for CSDS in Category B projects: assess, inventory, and treat. Note that treatment is not required to be completed during Category B activities. Depending on circumstances, CSDS treatments may be completed through subsequent projects or through a watershed treatment plan. Category B projects assess the project area for CSDS site locations and identify whether they are located in an active project area or located on an appurtenant road. Appurtenant roads are roads that are not used to actively implement project activities, but are within the project area. Permittees may assess appurtenant roads later and itemize them in the CSDS inventory. The CSDS initial assessment must be completed before the NPO is submitted. All CSDS identified during the project assessment will be added to the CSDS map and CSDS inventory table. Both are required submissions for the NPO and annual reporting. If new CSDS are observed during implementation or monitoring of the project, permittees will add them to the inventory, address accordingly, and include in the annual report. On the next slide, you can click on an interactive map to see more information. CSDS number 1 is a culvert crossing at Howard Creek, a Class 3 watercourse. CSDS number 2 is a drafting site on a tributary to Salmon Creek, a Class 1 watercourse. CSDS number 3 is a bridge crossing at Haskell Creek, a Class 2 watercourse. CSDS number 4 is a culvert crossing at Chapman Creek, a Class 3 watercourse. CSDS number 5 is a culvert crossing at Sulphur Creek, a Class 1 watercourse. CSDS inventory. Identification of CSDS for deferred treatment. CSDS identified during project assessments that the permittee proposes to defer for treatment must be added to a centralized CSDS inventory tracking system and monitored for the life of the project in accordance with the MRP, Attachment B. The centralized CSDS inventory must be maintained by the permittee and made available to Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, or Central Valley Regional Board, CVRWQCB, staff upon request. The permittee must provide justification of the determination of deferral of treatment. Deferred CSDS treatments will be completed through subsequent projects or through a watershed treatment plan, or WTP, detailed further in Unit 5. As stated previously, CSDS selected for treatment will be subject to active management. Permittees will follow agency and NEPA best management practices and install improvement measures in accordance with their recommendations. Permittees will monitor these CSDS treatment sites before, during, and after treatment activities to gauge effectiveness of the actions taken. Permittees will continue adjusting treatment methods and monitoring the target CSDS until the threat to water quality is reduced. On the next slide, you will find a CSDS assessment flowchart. To learn more about the process, please review the steps on the flowchart. Click each icon for more instructions on how to engage in each step. This flowchart and information can also be found in the Unit 3 Resources area. The Central Valley Water Board may require the permittee to implement corrective actions to address any CSDS at any time. The Controllable Sediment Source Reduction Program, or CSSRP, approaches water quality protection at the watershed level, as opposed to individual project level like Category A and B. Permittees will cycle in new watershed treatment plans every 7 years, and commit to completing treatment for the entire watershed within 10 years of those plans. CSSRP will be detailed more in Unit 5. On the next slide, you can explore the interactive SWRCB Huck watershed map. Similar to Category B projects, the CSSRP requires permittees to assess an entire area, identifying CSDS in a map and a table. However, for the CSSRP, the assessment is formalized in a field assessment work plan. As part of the assessment, permittees will identify any overlap with existing or planned Category A or B projects. For all new CSDS identified, permittees will determine treatment needed and prioritize CSDS sites. As treatment progresses through the 10-year term, permittees will report progress to the Central Valley Water Board with annual interim progress reports and a final completion report. Category B projects may fall within a watershed previously selected for CSSRP, where an assessment of the proposed footprint is already complete. When this occurs, permittees need not repeat the assessment for the Category B project footprint. They can utilize the CSSRP assessment findings for the Category B proposal package. Welcome to Unit 4. This unit covers monitoring and reporting requirements outlined in the order. The Monitoring and Reporting Program, referred to as MRP, includes requirements for project activities covered under this order. The MRP is necessary to measure compliance and effectiveness of the order, and to ensure that water quality is not negatively impacted by non-point source discharges of waste. The MRP is covered in detail in Order Attachment B, including monitoring requirements by category and reporting. The MRP ensures compliance, verifies effectiveness, and confirms implementation of mitigation measures under Water Code Section 13267. The Executive Officer of the Central Valley Water Board may review, modify, and reissue the MRP to a permittee at any time that land use activities could affect waters of the state. All monitoring records and reports must be retained by the permittee for the life of the project and for at least 5 years after completion. The Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program, referred to as MMRP, is covered in detail in Attachment C. MMRP requirements generally apply to biological resources. The following slide provides a brief overview of the MMRP, but is not expanded further within this training. Please refer to Attachment C for details on MMRP requirements. The Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program is a component of the Environmental Impact Report. These reports are prepared in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. The MMRP is required to include a summary table showing all applicable mitigation measures for the project, including implementation status and schedule. For Category A monitoring, the permittee must conduct monitoring in accordance with agency directives. This may include the National Environmental Policy Act, Best Management Practice Directives, forest plans, or resource management plans. If a discharge incident occurs and is found to be threatening waters of the state, the Central Valley Water Board should be notified within 24 hours of discovery, and additional Category B monitoring and reporting may be required. Category B monitoring requirements are field-focused evaluations in areas where there is a potential to negatively impact surface waters. The permittee must conduct implementation and effectiveness monitoring at all Category B projects with the following focus areas where applicable: roads, trail systems, landings, staging areas, campgrounds, and their surrounding drainages, permanent and temporary water crossings, water drafting locations and watercourse or lake protection zones, any areas with unstable soils, and identified CSDS. These areas must be monitored each year that project activities are occurring, unless the areas are treated, stabilized, and functioning as designed. There are two types of monitoring: implementation and effectiveness. Implementation monitoring occurs at completion of project activities before the start of winter. Effectiveness monitoring occurs after the winter period. The main purpose of implementation monitoring is to verify that BMPs are functioning as designed prior to the winter period. This includes visually evaluating the individual measures used at each project site. Implementation monitoring consists of location, frequency, and time frame. Monitoring must occur in focus area locations as outlined in the MRP. Monitoring will occur at the completion of project activities. The timeframe for monitoring must occur following the completion of activities, but before the start of the upcoming winter period, which commences on November 15th of each year. Effectiveness monitoring helps determine if applied management measures were effective in preventing non-point source discharges of waste into waters of the state. Effectiveness monitoring is a visual evaluation of project components applied to prior year Category B projects and is conducted following the winter period. Effectiveness monitoring will occur in the same focus areas as implementation monitoring. The frequency of monitoring will depend on the conditions at the first site visit. The first effectiveness visit will occur after the winter season. If the initial visit identifies impacts or potential impacts to sensitive resources or water quality, additional visits and reporting may be required. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Photo point monitoring can be used to accurately represent site conditions and development throughout the course of a project. In this section, you will learn more about the reporting requirements of the order. In the event that a discharge or threatened discharge occurs, the permittee must notify the Central Valley Water Board within 24 hours of discovery and submit a written report within 14 days of detection. Discharge incident reports must contain all relevant information as required by the order. Please review this list for report content requirements. Discharges that meet CSDS definition must follow all applicable CSDS monitoring and reporting requirements as was detailed in Unit 3. For all Category A and B projects that include broadcast or aerial application of pesticides, the permittee must submit a notification at least 15 days prior to application. Any changes to a previously submitted pesticide application notification must be submitted in writing at least 48 hours prior to pesticide application. Pesticide application notifications are required to include project location information, materials, application equipment, and a signed certification statement. Order section titled Pesticide Application contains some important prohibitions to consider when planning pesticide application. For Category A and B projects, for both broadcast or aerial, the following locations are prohibited from pesticide application: watercourse and lake protection zones, or WLPZs. Dimensions for WLPZ protected under the order are identified in Table 1. They match the California Forest Practice Rules. Areas burned within the previous 3 years on slopes greater than 30%, unless 50% or greater ground cover is present. All order documents and attachments, including template submittals, will be made available on the order website and updated periodically. Permittees are encouraged to review all order documents and resources on the website before preparing each new required submittal. This will ensure that each submittal incorporates the most up-to-date order guidance. Feel free to reach out to Central Valley Water Board staff at any time with questions. Each permittee must submit a Notice of Planned Operations, or NPO, for Category B projects at least 15 days before commencing project activities, and no later than 30 days after the initiation of ground disturbance for post-emergency recovery projects. An NPO will remain in effect for 1 year from the signature date, after which it will expire. If project activities are expected to continue longer than 1 year, the permittee must submit an updated NPO at least 15 days prior to the expiration date. If a project NPO expires, a new NPO must be submitted at least 15 days prior to project activities recommencing. NPOs must contain federal agency information, project information, CSDS information, and a project map. MRP section, Reporting Requirements for Category B projects, contains complete instructions and report requirements for NPOs. The next slide shares an example of a sample Notice of Planned Operations form. Click on the image for more information. This slide highlights the CSDS information to be included as part of an NPO. MRP section, Notice of Planned Operations Reporting Requirements for Category B projects, contains complete instructions and report requirements for NPOs. The next slide shares an example of a CSDS worksheet. This section details the annual reporting requirements for Category A and B projects, as well as emergency response actions. The annual reports for Category A include the list of all Category A projects that were active during the previous reporting period and will include the current project status. Click each title to learn more. Category B projects have a greater potential to impact water quality. Additional reporting components and requirements are required beyond those previously outlined for Category A projects. Category B project annual reports must include the location of operations, CSDS project map and inventory, and effectiveness monitoring report. Click each block to learn more. Click each of the items below to learn more about the annual report components for emergency response actions. The MRP section titled Annual Report Components for Emergency Response Actions details the required components for emergency response action annual reporting. Emergency response action annual reports must include basic project information such as the name and description of work that occurred, any reports and data, and descriptions of corrective actions. Emergency response action annual reports are due on September 30th following the emergency response. As part of the Controllable Sediment Source Reduction Program, the permittee is required to identify and abate actual or threatened discharges of waste to surface waters from CSDS on lands owned or managed by the permittee. If a targeted watershed is identified, the permittee must submit a work plan for each watershed. Field assessments shall be conducted to identify and characterize these CSDS. Field assessment work plans must be prepared and submitted to the board for selected HUC 12 watersheds. Work plans must be submitted to the board for executive officer review on a 7-year cycle, with the first work plan due approximately 6 months from the date of order adoption. Watershed treatment plans are prepared after the field assessment work plans are approved. Submittal requirements are outlined in Section E.2. Watershed treatment plans must be implemented within 10 years of the date of board approval. The process shall be revisited on 7-year cycles throughout the duration of this order. Interim progress reports must be submitted annually, beginning 1 year from the date of board approval for the watershed treatment plan. The report shall include documentation of compliance with the watershed treatment plan, status summary of each project and remaining activities, explanation of implementation delays, and a summary of implementation progress. Final reports are due no more than 60 days after completion of the watershed treatment plan, or no later than 10 years from the date of board approval of the watershed treatment plan, whichever comes first. Final completion report requirements are detailed in Section E.4. Watershed treatment plans may be modified or extended at the permittee's request. Modification requests can be made if an emergency has occurred within the project area or outside of the area with the potential to impact the project. Requests are subject to review and approval. Permittees may request up to 3 years of additional time to complete program activities. Extension requests must include an explanation and justification for the additional time and demonstrate that the time requested is not longer than necessary to complete all project activities. Additionally, the permittee must demonstrate the additional time is sufficient to complete all applicable watershed treatment plan activities. Both extensions and modifications must be approved by the executive officer. This section contains additional general reporting information and requirements. The Central Valley Water Board is a paperless office. Therefore, work plans and reports should be submitted in searchable portable document format PDF, Word, and/or Excel when feasible. Documents that are less than 50 megabytes should be emailed to the appropriate office, either Rancho Cordova, Redding, or Fresno. For documents larger than 50 megabytes in size, permittees should coordinate with CVR-WQCB staff to facilitate document transfer. In the subject line of the email, include the program, subject, and the name of the staff person meant to receive the document. All previously described reports must include the certification statement and signature of the authorized representative. Unit 5, Long-Term Sediment Source Reduction and Watershed Treatment. To begin, please click Continue. Welcome to Unit 5. This unit focuses on the requirements of the order concerning sediment source reduction and the associated watershed treatment. Additionally, this unit addresses reporting requirements to ensure compliance and effective monitoring. This section highlights an overview, purpose, and order requirements of the Controllable Sediment Source Reduction Program, known as CSSRP. The Watershed Treatment Plan runs a 7-year cycle, beginning 6 months after order adoption. In the Monitoring and Reporting Program, or MRP, Table 1 details each WTP extends until the permittee can effectively demonstrate that all CSDS have been addressed across the watershed. The permittee must regularly report on implementation and effectiveness of treatment measures completed for order compliance. The CSSRP is vital for assessment and treatment of potential sediment discharge sources. The CSSRP requires assessment and prioritization within a HUC 12 watershed. The assessment must consider multiple parameters affecting water quality. CSSRPs should be tailored to the region and project. They should be routinely evaluated for effectiveness. Native surfaced roads have been identified as a predominant sediment source in forested watersheds. These unpaved roads can increase sediment loads significantly as a result of surface erosion. Combined with hydrologically connected roads and watercourses, any underperforming watercourse crossings have the potential to impact water quality. The Controllable Sediment Source Reduction Program consists of 6 major components. The requirements for each component will be covered in subsequent slides. The CSSRP requires various planning and implementation steps to be adhered to, with subsequent reporting. This section addresses the process and components of the CSSRP. The first step in the CSSRP process is identification of one or more HUC 12 watersheds with the potential to be impacted by project activities. To be considered for the CSSRP, the watersheds must meet at least 2 of the 8 selection criteria. 1. For USFS, 50% or greater ownership of the watershed land. For BLM, 30% or greater ownership. 2. The selected watershed drains to a source watershed. 3. The average erosion hazard rating is moderate or severe. 4. The watershed itself is listed, or it drains to, a watershed listed on the 303D list of impaired watersheds. 5. Current receiving waters would benefit from CSDS treatment. 6. Cumulative watershed effects and/or watershed condition index analyses, or other similar assessments demonstrate water sediment transport impacts water quality. 7. The watershed has already been subject to other relevant assessments of existing watershed impacts. 8. The watershed is subject to federal agency directives related to water quality. The next step is development of a field assessment work plan. Each plan will go through a review and approval process before it can be implemented. The assessment work plan shall include watershed identification, rationale for selection, maps, proposed schedule, and signature and certification. Once approved, the field assessment can occur and those results will be used to draft the watershed treatment plan. The permittee must implement the field assessment work plan in accordance with the monitoring and reporting program. If the plan needs to be modified, the permittee must notify the executive officer in writing as soon as it becomes apparent that modifications are needed. Monitoring and reporting details can be found in the MRP Table 1, CSSRP schedule. The next step is development of a watershed treatment plan based on the results of the field assessment work plan. The watershed treatment plan will need board review and approval before implementation. The watershed treatment plan shall include detailed descriptions of all proposed corrective actions to abate discharges of sediment to receiving waters. Other projects with the potential to impact waters shall be detailed as well. This includes restoration and maintenance activities. Detailed maps showing the locations of the watershed and planned CSDS treatments shall be included. The report shall include permitting actions necessary to implement the proposed treatments. Any planned community outreach and engagement activities shall be included with the plan, and finally, the proposed project timeline and implementation schedule shall be outlined. This includes interim milestones designed to ensure progress towards project completion. The order requires watershed treatment plans to be implemented and completed no more than 10 years from board approval. This section addresses implementation. Each project conducted as part of the WTP will be covered under Category A or Category B of this order, based on eligibility criteria, unless otherwise permitted by the Central Valley Water Board or the State Water Board, and are subject to the requirements applicable to that category included in the MRP. Attachment B. Category B projects under the WTP are exempt from additional CSDS assessment and inventory requirements. After Central Valley Water Board approval of the first WTP, subsequent WTP development activities may overlap with ongoing, approved WTP implementation. The permittee must submit an annual interim progress report, beginning 1 year from the date the WTP was approved by the board and annually thereafter. Watershed treatment plans are due to be completed 10 years from board approval. Within 60 days after completion of each board-approved WTP, or no more than 10 years from the date of board approval, a final completion report must be submitted. The order contains monitoring and reporting requirements that will assist in the protection of water quality through assessment and verification of the adequacy and effectiveness of order requirements. The order requires the identification, assessment, and treatment of controllable sediment discharge sources through the implementation of project activities, routine maintenance, stormproofing, and through the order's controllable sediment source reduction program specific requirements. Each of these protective actions has a matching reporting requirement. Permittees are expected to utilize reporting to demonstrate their compliance with order requirements. Field assessment reports must include a summary of findings from the field assessment. The results can be presented in table format as long as all required components are included. All controllable sediment discharge sources within the watershed must be identified, including type and the estimated volume of sediment discharge or potential discharge. The report should also include a map depicting the targeted watersheds and extent of controlled sediment discharge sources surveyed. The annual interim report must be submitted each year beginning 1 year from the date of WTP plan approval. The report shall document compliance with milestones within the approved WTP. The report must include an updated status summary of projects and activities. This includes NEPA process status, funding status, and the implementation status of each CSDS. The report must also include explanations of any project delays and the progress of implementation. All reports must be signed and certified. The final completion report is due no more than 60 days after completion of the watershed treatment plan activities or no later than 10 years from the date of WTP approval, whichever comes first. The final compliance report shall include a description of all activities treated or remaining, project names, estimated quantities of CSDS discharge volumes treated, lists of added or discovered sites, description of the watershed including compliance and implementation progress of the watershed treatment plan. Reports must be signed and certified. The order requires the permittee to maintain project records and documentation throughout the life of the project and for 5 years post-completion. In the event of an audit, all project-related documents requested must be provided to the Central Valley Water Board within 30 days from the date of request. Unit 6, Watercourse Crossings. To begin, please click Continue. Welcome to Unit 6, Watercourse Crossings. In this unit, you will learn about considerations for both design and installation of watercourse crossings and components downstream of roadway drainage structures. Please note that upstream components will be covered in Unit 7. The permit follows the same definitions and requirements for watercourse classifications and watercourse and lake protection zone widths, buffer lengths, or WLPZ, as the California Forest Practice rules. Note that the surrounding slopes can double or triple the required buffer length. There are 4 watercourse crossing classifications listed in California Forest Practice rules that are referenced in the Nonpoint source permit. Note that the classes are not necessarily related to a specific volume, but to the beneficial uses assigned to the water body. On the next slide, you will learn more about each class. Class 1 watercourses include domestic supplies, including springs, on-site, and/or within 100 feet downstream of the operations area. Fish are always or seasonally present on site, and the watercourse includes habitat to sustain fish migration and spawning. Class 1 watercourses generally consist of perennial streams, experiencing continuous flow of surface water throughout the entire year. Class 2 watercourses include fish always or seasonally present offsite within 1,000 feet downstream. They provide aquatic habitat for non-fish aquatic species. They exclude Class 3 waters that are tributary to Class 1 waters. Class 2 watercourses can be either perennial or intermittent streams, intermittent referring to streams that only flow during and shortly after a precipitation event. Class 3 watercourses do not contain aquatic life. They show evidence of being capable of sediment transport to Class 1 and 2 waters under normal high water flow conditions after completion of permit activities. Class 3 watercourses can be either intermittent or ephemeral streams. Class 4 watercourses are man-made, are generally downstream, and consist of established domestic, agricultural, hydroelectric supply, or other beneficial use. In this next section, watercourse crossing types, we will identify and detail crossing types often implemented in rural road and forest settings. Temporary stream crossings are used to provide short-term access to an area and should be installed wherever a proposed temporary road crosses a stream channel, regardless of its size. Temporary crossings should be either stabilized or removed before winterization deadlines for the location. Dry fords are designed for Class 3 watercourses. Water conveyance is designed only to convey nuisance flows. Wet fords are designed for Class 1 or 2 streams, and water conveyance must be designed to accommodate those flows. Please note that wet and dry fords, culvert fills, and Humboldt crossings with or without pipe are some examples of temporary crossings, but not an exhaustive list. Click each image to learn more. Temporary wet fords consist of a low water crossing through an existing channel bed. Wet ford means water overtops the road surface. Native materials may be used to stabilize the crossing. Temporary dry fords consist of a low water crossing through an existing channel bed. Dry ford means water is not present during use. The different categories of dry ford are based on the material used. Culverted fill crossings use hard or soft materials to build up the roadway above a culvert installed in the channel bed. Culverted fill crossings can be designed to have any flow capacity, low or high. Log and pipe crossings consist of timber logs placed parallel with the channel flow, combined with one or more drain pipes to convey flows. Log crossings, also known as Humboldt crossings, consist of timber logs placed parallel to the channel flow. Log crossings have very little flow capacity, so they should not be used in channels subject to storm runoff. Humboldt crossings will not be detailed further in this training. Straw bales over log and pipes provide separation between the stream and overlying road materials. We just reviewed the temporary crossing category. Next, you will move on to the topic of permanent crossings. Permanent crossings may be designed for seasonal or year-round use, but the water conveyance is designed to convey all potential flows that may occur. Click each image to learn more. Permanent wet fords consist of a low water crossing through an existing channel bed. The road surface is ramped down and crosses the bed of the channel. Gravel and concrete are commonly used to stabilize the crossing. Permanent vented fords consist of the hardened road base constructed over culvert pipes. They are similar to culvert stream crossings. However, they are designed to withstand flows regularly overtopping the structure. Rock-armored crossings consist of a gradual dip in the road surface and replacement of the channel bed materials with armored and/or porous rock fill. Stream crossing culverts are structures to convey the entire flow of a watercourse or stream. Culverts are intended to capture the entire flow and allow for filling in the surrounding stream area. Bridges are intended to keep the roadway outside of the stream channel high water line and thus do not require flow diversion. Roads constructed over box culverts are considered culvert fill, not bridges. In this section, you will explore general design considerations for rural road watercourse crossings. Prior to the design process, it is essential for planners and designers to assess existing conditions. Assessment and design of watercourse crossings requires investigation of the water, soil, and vegetation that is present both upstream and downstream of the crossing location. Furthermore, the data available for the crossing location will determine which assessment method is most appropriate for the design. Investigation of existing water conditions starts with hydrologic assessment. The crux of hydrologic assessment is quantifying the expected flows at a crossing feature. Existing conditions and available data sources will determine which methodology would provide the most reliable flow estimate. Over the past 50 years, iterations of the forest practice rules have increased the recommended design storm event from 25 to 50 to 100 years. In both the Forest Practice Rules and CAL FIRE Crossing Guide, watercourse crossing design is required to account for both the 100-year design flow volume and associated debris and/or sediment flows. On the next few slides, you will learn about and have the opportunity to interact with some online resources from the U.S. Geological Survey and U.S. Department of Agriculture. StreamStats is an online mapping application provided by the U.S. Geological Survey. It allows users to access a wealth of hydrologic information, including flow statistics and basin characteristics. Given a point along a reach of a water channel, StreamStats can estimate a watershed polygon, including the area draining to that point, elevations, and average slope within the polygon. On the next slide, you can explore the StreamStats tool. The National Water Dashboard is a comprehensive and publicly accessible repository of water data collected by the U.S. Geological Survey. It encompasses a vast range of information on stream flow, groundwater levels, water quality, and water use across the United States. When pursuing the flow transference method, users can search for stream gauges in the vicinity of their site, review the physical and geographic characteristics of nearby streams, and access historic stream flow data. On the next slide, you will find the interactive online resource. The Web Soil Survey is an online tool provided by the U.S. Department of Agriculture that enables users to access detailed soil information for a specific location or area of interest. It offers interactive maps and reports containing valuable data on soil properties. Specifically, soil gradation and horizon depths can guide preliminary planning for rough grading and material import requirements. Soil class and infiltration capacity can guide drainage design. Access to the resource is found by clicking the link on this page. Once in the site, click the green Start WSS button at the top of the page to access the map. The Precipitation Frequency Data Server is an interactive tool developed to deliver NOAA Atlas 14 precipitation frequency estimates and associated information. An Atlas 14 precipitation frequency table can provide the storm intensity value required for the rational method. On the next slide, you will have the opportunity to explore the Precipitation Frequency Data Server site. To navigate the interactive map, click on the menu on the left or select the drop-down menu on the top. Click on the link to the Precipitation Frequency Data Server link on this slide to interact with the tool. Please note that the link will open in a new window. Please be aware that CAL FIRE recommends a minimum time of concentration of 10 minutes, so users should disregard the 5 and 1 minute intervals provided in the Atlas 14 PF table. Please click each item to learn more about each of the hydrologic assessment methods, including the rational method, the magnitude and frequency method, the transference method, and using computer programs. Once the design flow has been determined, the next step is to evaluate the capacity or performance of existing features, if any. If the existing features are determined to be sufficient, then the design is complete, and improvements may not be necessary. If the features are insufficient, the design process will bridge that gap and determine the improvements needed to achieve the baseline design goals. Following the office calculation of 100-year flood flows for crossings, it is necessary to determine the required cross-sectional area required to convey the flow. Culvert design and installation considerations are covered later in this unit in more detail. In this next section, you will explore design considerations for rural road watercourse crossings. Depending on the improvements proposed, the design process may vary greatly. The type of crossing facility selected will depend on a number of factors. Each of these 11 elements should be considered before selecting the final design or location for the stream crossing installation. Whether fish, amphibians, or other wildlife of any life stage use the channel as a migration route at the crossing site. Whether the crossing will be temporary or permanent. The types of vehicles that will use the crossing. The slope, configuration, and stability of the natural hill slopes on either side of the channel. The slope of the channel bed. The orientation of the stream relative to the proposed road. The expected 100-year flood discharge. The amount and type of sediment and woody debris that is in transport within the channel during flood conditions. The installation and subsequent maintenance costs for the crossing. The expected frequency of use. And limitations and designs imposed by permits and other legal requirements. Click each item to learn more. During initial assessment, designers determine aquatic species present upstream and downstream of the watercourse. Identifying fish-bearing streams significantly affects the design constraints on a proposed improvement. Fish crossing design is aimed at minimal impact on habitat while improving ecological connectivity for salmonid and other native fish, amphibians, reptiles, macroinvertebrates, insects, and other organisms that make up the aquatic food web. Stream crossings. At the crossing point itself, the primary design consideration is the bed of the channel. Stream crossings should follow the natural width and channel bed material as closely as possible to maintain consistent flow for wildlife while avoiding scour. Grade control. Both upstream and downstream of the crossing, several design structures can be used to maintain hydraulic roughness, elevation control, and ensure passage during low flows. Fish crossing design should be conducted by qualified and experienced professionals, which may mean a combination of biologists, geologists, and/or engineers. There are several voluminous federal and state guidance documents available for reference by design professionals. To access the resources, click the links on this page. Please note that these resources are also included in the Unit 6 Resources document. Sediment and debris passage are more of a concern for culvert crossings than fords or bridges. Inspection and regular maintenance of culvert crossings and associated protections is essential to prevent failure over the life of the culvert. Click each image to learn more. For sediment and debris flows, capacity design is the best cure. Culvert sizing design should ensure capacity for 100-year flood events and the associated sediment and debris loads that accompany them. The CAL FIRE Crossing Guide repeats the 100-year flow volume requirement for all culverts, regardless of materials or placement configuration. Further, it quantifies the specification for sediment and debris capacity. The headwater to pipe diameter ratio, HW divided by D, is 2/3, or 0.67. HW is the total depth of water measured from the culvert inlet, and D is the interior diameter of the culvert. When a culvert maintains one-third open head space, sufficient sediment and debris may pass through. The placement and adaptation of culvert inlet can greatly improve the resiliency of the entrance to plugging. Each option has strengths and weaknesses, which can be addressed by protective measures or upstream diversions. The three most common inlet treatments include the following. Projecting barrel ends are cheap, strong, and simple to install. The major drawback is being more susceptible to plugging. Mitered inlet ends are cheap and simple to install and offer significantly greater flow capacity and reduced plugging potential. The major drawback is that unreinforced ends have little structural strength. And flared inlet ends are more complex to design and install, however they offer similar flow capacity to mitered ends and significantly reduce plugging potential. The major drawback is the initial expense of installation. The intent of debris barriers is not to catch all sediment and debris, only material sized too large for the culvert. Structures installed upstream from the culvert entrance can serve three primary functions. They collect debris for regular maintenance removal, including trash racks and fine screens to collect smaller debris in urban areas. They redirect debris out of the channel. Or they redirect misaligned woody debris to flow through the downstream culvert. While debris barriers are allowed, they are not recommended for general use or design as part of new development. Debris barriers will be subject to increased scrutiny and substantial inspection and maintenance requirements. The terms snorkel and riser are used interchangeably to describe vertical riser pipes installed into the shaft of the culvert, several feet from the culvert pipe entrance. A riser pipe is usually slotted over its vertical length to allow water passage during rising water levels. If the main shaft of the culvert becomes plugged and the forebay floods, the riser slots allow floodwaters to slowly enter the culvert and slowly reduce the buildup. In the event of a rapid flood that overtops the riser, the top inlet allows for high volume flows into the culvert. Slotted risers are open at the top, or the top has a debris screen for safety that is also intended to prevent plugging of the riser. Sediment that accumulates in the basin behind the road fill will need to be excavated and hauled away during the dry season, so the basin has full capacity to trap sediment the next wet season. While vertical risers are allowed in, they are not recommended for general use or design as part of new development. Design and construction of fords and culverts must consider outlet or downstream fill slope. The Rural Roads Handbook presents 6 key factors to ensure successful discharge through the watercourse crossing. Please review the information by clicking on each image. Slope gradient stability depends on the following: fill material, cohesive soils or rock, compaction of all fill layers, compaction equipment, and compaction of fill slope face. Armoring and riprap can be installed at culvert inlets and outlets to provide the following improvements: protect the base of the slope, trap sediment eroded from the upper slope, and energy dissipation below the culvert outlet. Culvert outlet extensions prevent erosion and fill undercutting by ensuring culvert extends past the fill material. Road surface drainage should extend beyond the crossing surface and ensure hydrologic disconnection from the fill slope. Erosion control measures should be added to protect any disturbed surfaces until a permanent cover develops, whether that is a rock face or vegetative cover. Critical dip placement should convey flood flows into the natural channel, avoiding diversion flows down the roadway or side ditches during a crossing failure. Hydrologic connectivity refers to direct drainage from a roadway into a watercourse channel, either from the crossing itself, the cut or fill slope, or drainage ditches on either side of the crossing. Achieving complete hydrologic disconnection can be challenging. The Rural Road Handbook identifies several simple measures that can significantly reduce hydrologic connectivity. Click each topic to learn more. In this next section, you will explore design and construction considerations specific to crossing types. All watercourse crossings require a protected foundation. The foundation install and components vary, but the need to separate subgrade from water flows is critical to the lifetime of the crossing feature. Click on each item to learn more. Construction and deconstruction phases vary depending on the characteristics of the crossing and should be addressed on a case-by-case basis. Just like a permanent crossing, all temporary crossings require assessment, planning, and phased construction and decommissioning. If the crossing is to be constructed during active flows, temporary culverts can be installed to divert flows during development of the remaining crossing features. Temporary wet fords constructed in silty reaches of a watercourse require improvement. Unstabilized channel beds will release sediment when flows recommence. Construction and deconstruction phases vary depending on the characteristics of the crossing and should be addressed on a case-by-case basis. The CAL FIRE Crossing Guide summarizes 9 construction steps for fill slope heights of about 15 feet and less that can be constructed with conventional equipment from a position near the final road surface elevation. Clearing and removing organic material. Benching the fill slope and proceeding up the slope. Constructing the fill slope in 1-foot lifts. Constructing the roadbed dip. Over-excavating the outside fill slope to the riprap base depth. Placing rock base and riprap in the keyway and upslope. Shaping the rock riprap face. Constructing the upper crown bench and placing rock riprap. And placing gravel across the roadway crossing. The size, texture, gradation, and placement of rock armor in steps 6 through 8 requires careful consideration of the design flow surrounding slope grades, upstream, and downstream conditions. The CAL FIRE Crossing Guide provides step-by-step guidance on a simplified method for riprap design, including a simplified design nomograph, which can be printed and referenced in the field. The CAL FIRE Crossing Guide also provides step-by-step guidance on considerations for rock size and depth for construction of rock-armored crossings. Federal Highway Administration nomographs can be used for culvert sizing when the design discharge and the allowable headwater depth are known. The Federal Highway Administration has published dozens of nomographs to account for different culvert sizes, shapes, materials, and end segments. Each nomograph provides a practical and visual tool for engineers to select appropriate culvert dimensions for efficient hydraulic performance. The Rural Road Handbook, CAL FIRE Crossing Guide, and the USFS Low Volume Road Guides provide specifications on culvert crossing design for a forest setting. Once the design culvert size has been determined, the next step is to holistically consider multiple design parameters surrounding the proposed crossing. Upstream inlet within the crossing and downstream outlet. Please click each item to learn more. Please click each item to learn more about the design and install of stream crossing culverts. Oftentimes, when the roadway grade prohibits the use of an oversized culvert pipe, designers opt to replace a single large diameter pipe with multiple smaller pipes to increase clearance between culvert and road base. This may succeed in a stream with little or no debris flow, such as a meadow crossing. However, in sloped drainages and ravines, where debris flows are greater, small diameter pipes are prone to debris plugging, regardless of quantity. 6 small diameter pipes installed at the same grade will plug just the same as one small diameter pipe. If debris flows are anticipated at a proposed watercourse crossing and a large diameter culvert is infeasible, designers may consider armoring the road surface and converting the crossing to a permanent vented ford. This will allow debris to overtop the crossing and eliminates the need for debris barrier entirely. The CAL FIRE Crossing Guide sets a baseline understanding for proposed bridge construction projects. Although permanent bridge structures are required to be engineered by a registered civil engineer, the design process often requires input from geologists, land surveyors, foresters, and biologists. CAL FIRE identifies 3 key elements to bridge design to ensure simple and reliable bridge work. Click each topic to learn more. This segment details examples of watercourse crossing failures and how to identify and address each. According to a study referenced in the CAL FIRE Crossing Guide, the top 3 most common causes of watercourse crossing failures in the California Coast Range are wood debris, a combination of wood and sediment, and hydraulic exceedance. Although the study focused on the coast, the message is the same for most Central Valley highlands. Flood discharge alone is not the primary cause of crossing failures. Wildfire events increase occurrence of all 3 causes. The 3 failure causes each have observable, preventable preceding conditions. Please click each item to learn more about causes, warning signs, and prevention. Watercourse crossings fail by one of 2 pathways. 1, they partially or completely erode or gully when floodwaters overtop them. Or 2, floodwaters are diverted down the adjacent road alignment instead of flowing over the road and washing out the crossing fill. Either way, stream crossing failure can significantly impact both wildlife and water quality. The 3 key failure causes can have a significant impact on watercourse crossing structures. Different causes and conditions lead to different impacts. These impacts, known as failure mechanisms, can affect any watercourse crossing. On the next few slides, you will explore each failure mechanism further. The 3 underlying causes and the 2 potential failure pathways can help lead roadway managers to the most likely failure mechanism. Here are the 3 most common failure mechanisms observed on rural mountainous watercourse crossings. Click on each image to learn more. All watercourse crossings require a protected foundation. When the features protecting the foundation are impacted or removed, the crossing is subject to catastrophic failure. Any crossing structure, even those designed with sufficient flow capacity, requires erosion protection of upslope and upstream surfaces. Erosion of the channel approach to the crossing can lead to undercutting the crossing itself or diversion of stream flows around the crossing. Uncompacted soils are highly susceptible to erosion. Whether a buried lift within the roadway cross-section was not properly compacted during construction, or if a cut or fill slope was exposed and decompacted during its lifetime, loose soils are subject to erosion from wind, rain, or even foot or vehicular traffic. Hydraulic design, material selection, initial placement, and regular maintenance all affect the operational lifetime of a water crossing. Even properly designed and constructed crossings require inspection, maintenance, and periodic repair actions to remain viable. Crossing structures are subject to disrepair from naturally occurring impacts and damage from natural or artificial sources. Damage and disrepair introduce additional failure points to a crossing structure, increasing the likelihood of catastrophic failure. Wildfire causes an increase in runoff, sediment load, and debris flow. Each effect increases by orders of magnitude following wildfire. Likewise, the probability of crossing failure increases significantly. Increased runoff alone leads to increased flow volumes in watercourses, causing flooding and overtopping water crossings. For planners and designers, increased flow volumes may translate to increases in stream order, for instance, flow volume and stream classification, such as risk to beneficial uses. The segment or reach of a watercourse classification can extend uphill during the first winter after a fire. For example, in an area of moderate to high soil burn severity, the riparian vegetation may die off and halt water uptake, causing increased runoff into a watercourse, increasing the flows from an unclassified to Class 3. Increased erosion on hillslopes leads to increased sediment load in watercourses. Increased wood debris and decreased vegetative cover lead to increased wood and plant debris load in watercourses. This can cause blockage of drainage structures and channel incision. More so than erosion and sediment load, debris flows increase significantly during and after higher intensity storms. After high-intensity storms, debris flows play a greater role in roadway and infrastructure damage. The CAL Fire Crossing Guide identifies 5 preventive measures to prepare watercourse crossings for increased post-wildfire water, sediment, and wood debris loads. Click each image below to learn more. As described in previous sections, post-wildfire flows generally carry higher debris loads. Undersized culverts should be considered for upsizing. Culvert risers can be installed in channels with high debris loads, or retrofitted on existing culverts after a wildfire event. As discussed in previous sections, culvert risers provide additional flow capacity. Daylighting is replacing an underground conveyance with a properly designed and constructed surface crossing. The most effective method to prevent crossing failure is to eliminate potential failure points. Culvert pipes require substantial design, assessment, protection, and regular maintenance to remain functional. Daylighting existing culverts eliminates the risk of all the failure mechanisms associated with underground crossings. If replacement of an existing crossing feature is not feasible, adding emergency overflow features allows for some control of flood flows during a crossing failure event. Emergency overflow pipes or surface channels can also be an inexpensive retrofit. Providing additional crossing pipes may increase the flow and sediment capacity of a crossing, but the openings are just as prone to debris plugging. As discussed in previous sections, flared ends facilitate sediment flow into the culvert and substantially reduce plugging potential at the culvert entrance. Participants must consider both the risk and the impact of failure during crossing site evaluation. The risk of failure refers to the likelihood of catastrophic crossing failure or significant loss of the road structure. And impact of failure refers to a threat to human safety or property and the beneficial uses of the receiving water body. If a water crossing failure would significantly impact downstream conditions, it is recommended to look beyond improving the crossing itself. Participants should implement overlapping protections, preventing erosion upstream and protecting existing features from future erosion events. Welcome to Unit 7, which presents considerations for design, construction, reconstruction, and decommissioning of roadways. Watercourse crossing designs were covered in Unit 6. This section discusses different roadway categories, skid trail design, and the applicable uses for each. Click each image to learn more. Similar to highways and city streets, rural roads are designed according to their intended use and life expectancy. Permanent roads are designed to last year-round and survive the elements. Seasonal roads are designed for short-term use in conjunction with appropriate conditions, such as weather and daylight. Road design standards, placement, and width will vary depending on utilization needs. The time of year, environmental considerations, and access requirements all factor in the design. Seasonal roads are constructed to a lower standard than permanent roads and are intended for fair weather use, not year-round service. They are built along planned routes meant to minimize stream and wetland crossings, and any required waterway crossings should be engineered to allow the unimpeded passage of floodwaters from a 100-year design storm event. However, seasonal roads may utilize natural surfaces like graded dirt or gravel that require dry conditions for use and are vulnerable to damage from flooding, erosion, and thawing. Regular inspection and maintenance such as grading, gravel replenishment, and vegetation or debris clearing are needed on seasonal roads to retain functional access during their operating season. Permanent roads are carefully engineered and built to withstand continual, year-round use by both the general public and forestry personnel. These all-weather roads feature robust waterway crossings and drainage structures that should be designed to accommodate 100-year flood flows, along with the associated debris and sediment loads. Permanent roads utilize durable surfaces such as rock or concrete over properly prepared substrates to support heavy vehicular loads over time. Regular maintenance is required on permanent roads to ensure they remain serviceable, including repairs to the surface, drainage features, bridges and culverts, and removal of debris, sediment, and vegetation. Temporary roads are low-grade unpaved roads built to provide basic vehicular access for a limited period during the dry season. They are situated and designed to minimize impacts to waterways and wetlands. At the end of the dry season, before the onset of wet seasonal conditions, temporary roads are decommissioned, all installed structures are removed, and disturbed areas are stabilized. Since temporary roads are intended for short-term use, they are not engineered to withstand major storms or flooding outside of the dry season. Skid trails can be considered temporary access roads in logging operations. Skid trails are used to transport felled trees from the stump to the landing area. When planning a road, the concept of less is best is generally the cheapest and least impactful approach. Road planning recommendations include: minimize total roadway miles constructed within each watershed under consideration. Use existing roads to the maximum extent possible. Minimize construction of new roads when existing routes are available. Use temporary roads and remove them at the end of an operation or season. This will reduce the long-term maintenance and environmental impacts of a permanent road. Construct new roads along ridges to follow the least impactful contour and avoid watercourse crossings. When constructing mid-slope, grade new roads following a flat contour to minimize the grade change, and thus the cut/fill needs. Minimize constructed features, and minimize the duration of construction near any environmentally sensitive area. And maintain pre-development runoff and recreate sheet flow wherever possible. Avoid introducing concentrated runoff. Skidders, tractors, or other heavy equipment drag logs down skid trails and leave ruts and soil disturbances. The location of a skid trail should be considered for the protection of water quality. Consider designing in areas with gentle grades to allow equipment mobility and to prevent erosion. After logging activities are complete, the skid trails should be rehabilitated to stabilize soils, control water flow, and restore vegetation. Click each image to learn more. Log landings are cleared turnout areas in the forest where harvested logs are collected, processed, and stored before transport. These flat areas with minimal slope, provide space for forestry equipment and vehicles to maneuver while loading and unloading logs. Log landings are ideally constructed in broad, gentle areas away from streams or steep hillsides. This helps to prevent debris flows or water quality issues from dislodged soil. The size of log landings can range from less than an acre for small operations up to 5 acres or more for large commercial logging sites. The size depends on the quantity of logs being harvested and the space needed for equipment access and storage. Proper construction, use, and rehabilitation of log landings helps minimize erosion and environmental impacts from forestry operations. Here are some examples of conditions to avoid during landing design. This is not an exhaustive list. Unstable surfaces may erode. Slopes steeper than 55% may slough. Inner gorges and steep headwater swales may scour. Steep ridges between swales may slough. Slopes greater than 50% leading to a watercourse may present a direct sediment load. Designated riparian zones are sensitive to sediment loading common to skid landings. Permit activities may utilize existing landings previously constructed within designated riparian zones. These landings should be evaluated for proper water quality BMP installation. Both existing and new BMPs should be maintained throughout ongoing operations. Landings constructed in forest systems should be built to maximize functionality while minimizing overall size and impact to the surrounding area. Natural benches and ridgetops are generally a good location to place a landing. To minimize impacts to sensitive resources, landings should be constructed in areas that are naturally flat or gently sloping and absent of watercourses within impact distance. Ground disturbance may extend beyond the locations and limits described earlier. Designers should consider erosion control measures throughout the disturbance area, even beyond the landing. The list on this slide shows potential BMPs that should be considered when ground disturbing activities have occurred in rural areas. This next section addresses design considerations and materials that comprise modern roadways. A road prism is the total cross-sectional area disturbed during roadway construction. This includes the road itself, shoulders, and any auxiliary areas such as drainage ditches and cut or fill slopes. Click each image to learn more. Ideally, road construction considerations should design ditches and runoff to disperse independently of streams and natural waterways. Reduction in the total surface area and length of roadways will result in less overall sediment load impacts to surrounding waterways. In the following slides, we will describe 4 common prism types. Click each image to learn more. Roads built on steep slopes, greater than 55%, may need to be fully benched. This is accomplished by cutting a cross-section into the slope and removing the side-casted spoil to the maximum extent possible. These roads generally create a significant amount of spoil material, which can be used to backfill low spots in the road or hauled away for storage offsite. Steep slopes and fully benched cross-sections require comprehensive erosion control design and may necessitate increased inspection frequency. For roadways built on slopes less than 55%, cut and fill operations can be used together to construct a partial bench. Spoil materials are cut from one section of the roadway to create a path for the road. Those spoils are then used to fill the portions of the roadway, which are below grade or downslope. This is a balanced, and thus cost-effective construction method. Generally, slopes are less than a 2-to-1 ratio, but in some cases steeper slopes may be used. Partial bench slopes should receive erosion control protection on both the cut and fill slopes. Partial benches may allow for an outsloped roadway cross-section, maximizing sheet flow runoff and minimizing drainage design needs. Outsloped roads will be covered later in this unit. Through-cut slopes are sections of roads embedded within a gradient. By nature of design, there is no outlet for drainage other than downflow within the road itself. If used, through-cut slopes should be as short as possible to mitigate runoff. Water will flow down road until there is an opportunity for the water to drain laterally off of the roadway, which may lead to erosion. Full-fill road construction entails importing 100% of the construction material onto the site to construct a road above the existing topography, above grade. The support structure used for full-fill roadways must be structurally engineered. Just like bench construction, full-fill requires permanent erosion protection measures on the shoulders, side slopes, and where the native material daylights at the edge of the fill materials to ensure no undercutting of the structure. Most roads experience some form of erosion. Factors such as slope gradient, soil characteristics, natural or artificial erosion control, and weather patterns will affect the erodibility of an area. Immediately installing erosion control measures on exposed slopes is the most effective way to minimize surface impacts of erosion. Upon completion of earthwork activities, a variety of erosion control measures may be implemented to stabilize the surface. Roadways should be graded and contoured to maintain the proper slope and crown, dispersing water from the road surface as quickly as possible. This will keep the roadway as dry as possible and prevent erosion and damage to the road surface. On the next few slides, you will learn more about outsloped, crowned, and insloped road designs. An outsloped roadway has its surface sloped gently from the inner edge down towards the outer edges. This facilitates drainage of water from the road surface to the outer edges and downhill side. Maintaining sheet flow and minimizing concentrated flow greatly reduces the drainage, erosion, and sediment controls needed within the road prism. Outsloped roads are the preferred slope design for unpaved low-volume roads. A crowned roadway has the highest elevation at the centerline of the road surface and slopes gently down towards both outer edges, resembling an inverted U shape. This allows water to drain off both sides of the road evenly. Crown cross-sections are generally paved roads, wide multi-lane roadways, and high-traffic roads. The crown distributes flows to both sides of a roadway, necessitating at least one drainage ditch. Crowning is only effective if surface materials are impervious and resistant to holding water. An insloped roadway has its surface sloped from the outer edge down towards the inner edge of the road. This allows water to collect in ditches or gutters along the roadside. Inslopes eliminate sheet flow crossing over the lip of the fill slope and greatly reduce the erosion and sediment protection measures required on the fill slope. However, insloped roads necessitate a drainage ditch on the inside edge, concentrating flows, which in turn requires additional drainage management downstream. Although insloped roads impact drainage more than outslope, the slope cross-section may be necessary when safety concerns are present. For example, on public roads with steep fill slopes, an insloped road is a traffic safety measure that encourages traffic to remain away from the outer edge of the roadway, without the need for physical barriers. Sometimes, drainage control is necessary. When building roads on unstable terrain, such as a stabilized landslide, it's crucial to divert drainage away from the slope to ensure stability. An insloped road can help achieve this by guiding surface flows into a controlled conveyance system, keeping flows off the landslide surface. When designing a new roadway alignment in an undeveloped area, the designer should consider the topography, specifically the slope of the land and any existing obstacles to ensure the alignment balances earthwork and hauling requirements. Similarly, when assessing an existing roadway for maintenance, upgrade, or repurposing, the designer should reconsider the natural topography and identify any opportunities to reduce the impact of the roadway on the natural landscape, minimizing the footprint wherever feasible. The Bureau of Land Management, BLM, Roadway Design Guide, 9113, and Primitive Roads Handbook, 9115, provide general guidance recommending usage of the Unified Soil Classification System, USCS, for visual soil investigation and classification of existing conditions. Reviewing soil surveys such as USGS Web Soil Survey, performing visual inspections, or physical soil tests in the field can produce sufficient data needed to optimize the design of an unpaved, low-volume road. However, for medium and high volume or paved roads, and for certain unstable feature mitigation projects, formal geotechnical testing and laboratory soils assessment may be necessary. The primary objective of drainage design is to maintain existing natural surface and subsurface drainage patterns as closely as possible. This will minimize impacts to natural features and expenses incurred due to implementing mitigation BMPs. New roadway design and existing roadway assessment should consider both surface flow conditions and subsurface groundwater flow conditions, if any. During existing roadway assessment, the design should prioritize restoring natural drainage patterns where the original design has unnecessarily altered. The composition of vehicular roads varies widely from region to region, depending on the materials available. Likewise, the layers, or courses, constructed to build up durable road surfaces vary depending on the usage needs. This image briefly identifies the four most common layers that may be utilized to construct paved roads. However, alternative designs may call for other material layers. Low-volume paved roads may only include the surface course and subgrade. Similarly, dirt roads only include the subgrade. This section details design considerations to minimize road drainage impacts on water quality. The key to successful surface drainage is to get the water off the cut slopes, fill slopes, and road surface as quickly as possible before it has the opportunity to concentrate into a large volume of flow or saturate the ground. The three most important rules for accommodating surface runoff are: 1. Drain and disperse water off the road rapidly so it cannot erode or seep into the roadbed. 2. Direct the runoff off the road often to avoid large, erosive flows from developing in long, undrained ditches or road surfaces. And 3. Direct the runoff to safe locations away from watercourses and unstable areas. Water quality protection at watercourse crossings was covered in detail in Unit 6. However, the protections do not end at the watercourse. Roadway design must consider drainage through the full roadway alignment, including upstream or uphill from all nearby watercourses. Water bars and rolling dips can each contribute to hydrologic disconnection, reducing flows directly to watercourses downstream and reducing overall water quality impacts from roadways. Design of these features consists of both sizing and placement. Proper spacing of individual features along a roadway alignment is just as important as the size of the features themselves. As stated earlier, each drainage feature should be assessed to ensure it returns flows to natural conditions as quickly as possible. Hydrologic connectivity refers to direct drainage from a roadway into a watercourse channel, either from the crossing itself, the cut or fill slope, or drainage ditches on either side of the crossing. Achieving complete hydrologic disconnection can be challenging. The image depicts a hydrologically disconnected watercourse crossing. The road has a ditch relief crossing on both sides, both approaches to the watercourse. One ditch relief crossing is underground, and the other is on the surface, but both provide the same function. Both crossings outflow onto a stabilized surface and disperse the flow across the landscape. Both ditch relief crossings are a sufficient distance from the crossing to ensure the outflow has enough length to disperse flows before reaching the watercourse. Rolling dips, or broad-based dips, may replace ditch relief culvert crossings. Rolling dips provide distributed drainage across a roadway and reduce the risk of failure of buried features. This concept is similar to utilizing a rock-armored watercourse crossing, which provides the same drainage capacity as a culverted crossing and reduced risk of failure. Rolling dips can serve as relief drainage for a roadside ditch on a crowned or in-sloped roads, or they can serve as a natural concentration point for outsloped roads. Just like a ditch relief culvert, proper drainage spacing, outlet protection, and dissipation is key. Outslope armoring ensures that flows dissipate after crossing the roadway. Rolling dips must be passable by all types of vehicles, be they log trucks or chip vans, at speeds moderately slower than design speeds. The grade along the path of travel, the cross slope, and the length of each rolling dip are dependent on the road prism and surrounding slopes. The Rural Road Handbook presents 3 types of rolling dip to accommodate a range of slopes. Type 1 is used on gentle roads, sloped less than 12%. The Type 1 rolling dip is broad, unbermed, and flows perpendicular to the path of travel. Type 2 is used on roads up to a 14% grade. The Type 2 rolling dip is short, bermed, and flows perpendicular to the path of travel. Type 3 is used on steep roads, greater than 14%. The Type 3 rolling dip is broad, unbermed, and flows obliquely to the path of travel. Rolling dips can be constructed on paved and improved roads and last multiple seasons, while water bars are suited to unsurfaced, earthen, temporary, or seasonal roads. Water bars consist of an unreinforced dip and parallel earthen berm running obliquely to the road alignment, placed while ensuring adequate drainage off the road surface. The berm ensures flows remain in the dip across the entire road cross-section. Roadway berms function similarly to a curb on either the inslope or outslope of a road. A berm is a paved or unpaved row of soil or gravel along the roadway edge, breaking sheet flow. Side berms run parallel to the roadway path of travel, not to be confused with water bar berms, which angle across the roadway. Berms constructed on ensloped roads do not receive flows and do not impact drainage. Similar to ensloped road cross-sections, side berms are only appropriate for specific use cases such as traffic safety and stabilized slope protection. Side berms are not recommended for roadway design in general. Click each image to learn more. Ditches are shallow or deep depressions constructed adjacent to a roadway, which collect sheet flow off the road surface and convey the flow downhill. Properly designed ditches contain regular relief discharge points such as culverts, cross drains, and lead-off ditches. Depending on the road prism, side ditches are an essential component to keep the road prism dry. Ditches themselves require proper spacing, stabilization, and maintenance. When improperly spaced, ditches without proper relief can plug and flood the road structure, or erode away, cutting into the road prism itself. Ditch stabilization can be hard materials such as rock and concrete, or soft vegetative cover such as grasses and crawling ground cover. Regular inspection and maintenance is necessary to ensure that vegetation, hardened cover materials, or silt do not plug the ditch. Ditch dimensions can vary greatly, from a foot-wide earthen dip adjacent to a roadway to a concrete line channel several feet across, which carries flows away from a roadway alignment. Ditch relief culverts are structures used to divert some of the runoff from the toe of slope ditch on a long downgrade to prevent the ditch from overtopping and or to control flow velocity and erosion in the ditch. In smaller ditches, check dams can be either a temporary or permanent improvement. Check dams counteract erosion by reducing the velocity of water flows. Ditch relief culvert design requirements may differ slightly for different agencies and jurisdictions. Each development should follow the requirements specific to their project planning and permitting documents. The PWA Rural Roads Handbook recommends installing culverts at a 30-degree angle to the ditch flow line and sloped minimum 2% steeper than the ditch flow line to remain self-cleaning. The hydraulic design of highway culverts does not provide design specifications for ditch relief culverts, only watercourse crossing culverts. However, throughout the FHWA guide, a 2% culvert barrel slope is assumed for most analyses and reference nomographs. Regardless which feature is selected to convey drainage flows across the roadway, the outlet requires protection of the underlying erodible soils. For example, rolling dips are not designed to convey large volumes of water, so they may require outlet protection measures such as rock-stabilized surface to dissipate flows. Culverts concentrate and speed flows, so additional infrastructure is needed to protect the outlet, slow the flow, or even retain the flow to capture sediment. Ditch relief culverts require outlet protection on the downstream fill slope where water exits the culvert. The scale of protection depends on the size, slope, and configuration of the culvert. This prevents scouring and erosion of the roadbed by dissipating the energy of the flowing water. Typical outlet protection consists of soft cover, medium cover, or hard artificial cover. Rock armoring involves placing a layer of large, angled rocks or riprap around the culvert outlet. This breaks up the water flow and provides a stable surface that resists erosion. Concrete outfalls are poured concrete slopes leading flows to an energy dissipation device. Headwalls guide the water in the intended direction and away from the slopes. Outlet protection is critical to prevent culvert undermining, downhill gully formation, and roadway washouts. Lead-off ditches are most commonly used in flat or fill areas with a raised roadway, and at switchbacks where a roadway abruptly turns up a hillside. In shallow through-cut roadways, a lead-off ditch may be cut directly into the downslope to provide relief to the side ditches. Lead-off ditches provide an alternative to concentrated drain outlets, directing flows to slow and dissipate into non-erodible areas like vegetated hillsides or grasslands. Lead-off ditches should redistribute flows across the ground surface far from any water bodies, ensuring sufficient distance to eliminate contact between the ditch and the watercourse. This will achieve hydrologic disconnection and reduce sediment load in waterways. This section details the stages of roadway construction, maintenance, and decommissioning. Road construction, whether permanent or temporary, is a multi-step process that requires proper design, planning, and execution. Construction considerations for rural areas include several layers of additional precaution and design evaluations. Each stage and/or phase of construction requires tailored erosion control BMPs upstream and water quality BMPs if located near watercourses. On the next slide, you will have the opportunity to learn more about each stage. Click each image to learn more. During clearing and grubbing, erosion control measures should be planned and implemented as soon as feasible after surfaces are disturbed. The top road surface, whether imported hardened materials or compacted native soils, should be sloped to ensure sheet flow drainage and reduce the need for downslope BMPs. During and after grading and compaction, exposed soils and subgrade materials pose significant risk of erosion and require erosion control. Without proper BMP and design considerations, road construction and maintenance can contribute to erosion control problems and sedimentation of waterways. Proper stabilization of roadways, including shaping, berms, placement of riprap, and bituminous or asphalt surfacing, can reduce erosion and sedimentation events. Rural road rehabilitation requires assessing the condition of the existing roadway to determine which components need repair, renovation, or replacement to extend the life of the road. Road maintenance is performed regularly to address normal wear and keep an existing roadway in serviceable condition. Examples include regraveling and regrading. Unlike new construction, rehabilitation and maintenance deal with existing road components rather than creating an entirely new roadway. Roads should be evaluated regularly to determine if maintenance or improvements need to be made. They should be maintained to prevent substantial damage, which may cause loss of use or damage to the surrounding area. Maintenance is faster, cheaper, and more convenient than allowing failures to occur and then repairing out of necessity. Click on each term to review additional information on reassessment and maintenance. As detailed at the beginning of this unit, roads and trails can be categorized by usage. Federal road classifications and associated BMP specifications slightly differ with each landowning agency. In 2012, the Forest Service published the Guidelines for Road Maintenance Levels, which breaks down the 5 formal levels used by this agency. Also published in 2012, the National BMP for Water Quality Management on National Forest System lands contains a cluster of BMPs dedicated to roadways in Section 12.2. In 2011, the Bureau of Land Management published the Roads Design Handbook, which specifies construction and maintenance requirements on roadway physical properties instead of formal categories. Their 2022 BMP Practices for Water Quality in California provides a similar cluster of BMPs dedicated to roadway construction, reconstruction, maintenance, and operations on pages 20 through 33. This section will focus on the 4 general categories presented in the Rural Road Handbook. Prioritization of road improvements should be decided based upon potential risks to water quality. Click each image for more information about each road category presented in the PWA Rural Road Handbook. Active roads can be low or high volume, public or private. The distinguishing trait is that they expect to receive traffic at least once per year. Active roads should be regularly inspected and maintained, as described throughout Units 6 and 7. Proper upkeep through grading, drainage clearing, and repairs is necessary to keep these open roads in a suitable condition for their designated traffic levels. Closed roads have been proactively closed to all traffic and may be removed or impassable for some or all segments of the road. The distinguishing trait is that closed roads have received remediation or permanent stabilization treatment to reduce or eliminate erosion. Abandoning road features with no inspection or remediation actions is not acceptable in permit-covered watersheds. Inactive roads can be public or private, but they generally experience low traffic volumes. The distinguishing trait is that inactive roads may not receive traffic for 1 or more years. As a result, inactive roads should be designed and maintained to withstand a winter season with minimal upkeep needs. For example, inactive roads may utilize passive drainage structures and grass or aggregate surfaces that require less frequent maintenance compared to heavily used active roads. Abandoned roads should not be left untreated, as they will continue to worsen over time. If abandoned roads are not properly closed and stabilized, they may pose a greater risk to water quality. Permittees should implement stabilization measures prior to completely abandoning the road surface. This next section details measures to decommission roadways. U.S. Forest Service National Core BMP Road 1 provides general guidance on each topic covered here and an overarching emphasis on stabilizing all road and cut surfaces, and reuse of inactive roads as opposed to full decommissioning. Decommissioning roadways should focus on erosion risk reduction, concentrating restoration at watercourse crossings and segments with erodible soils. When a roadway is slated for decommissioning, planners must identify and disconnect all junctions with other active roadways to eliminate all vehicular traffic. Note that physically blocking an entrance to a roadway prevents vehicular traffic, but does not signal the interior of the roadway has been permanently stabilized or decommissioned. Decommissioning an underground watercourse crossing means replacing the culvert crossing with a surface channel. At each watercourse crossing, excavate the road fill down to the natural channel bed depth to reconnect the floodplain and allow the stream to flow freely. Remove any imported fill material completely to restore proper channel dimensions and connectivity. This vertical excavation should span the entire road prism crossing the watercourse. At each decommissioned or removed watercourse crossing, excavate all sidecast, fill slope, and potentially unstable debris staged nearby, depending on the composition of the material. Remove any imported fill or waste material that could fail and deliver sediment to streams. Recontour excavated areas to a stable angle and revegetate to prevent erosion. Remove all ditch relief culverts and underground crossings by completely excavating and removing culverts and imported fill material. Replace underground crossings with surface cross drains similar to water bars. Avoid leaving any buried structures that could fail or alter subsurface flows. Note that removing culverts does not necessarily mean removal of all build features for the entire alignment. It only removes the flow restrictions. This unit presents considerations for the design and placement of temporary and permanent water diversion and water drafting features. Water drafting activities can look very different and cause unseen impacts to watercourses depending on the configuration. Several federal regulations and guidelines govern water drafting activities beyond the aquatic BMP guides presented in previous units. This section provides a summary of the resources available and their application both in design and in the field. Water drafting in forestry and rural development involves pumping water directly from surface or underground sources. Water drafting can refer to either removing water from the source, for example, dewatering or diverting undesirable flows, or collecting water supply for active use elsewhere. This training focuses on temporary water drafting practices during dry season projects, as opposed to the design and construction of permanent diversion fixtures. The federal Nonpoint source order covers several activities that may involve the utilization of surface or groundwater drafting. Activities may include dust abatement and soil conditioning. Click each image to learn more. Dust abatement involves water trucks repeatedly wetting unpaved roads and trails during construction and timber harvest activities. Dust abatement applies a small volume of water to the ground surface, intended only to moisten the exposed layer of soil. One or more trucks visit the drafting pad, fill a truck-mounted tank or a water trailer, and return to the worksite one or more times in a workday. Soil conditioning during construction involves water trucks wetting one or more subsurface soil layers to support tilling and compaction of subgrade materials. Soil conditioning may apply large volumes of water to a development site and may require one or more water trucks circulating from the drafting location to the worksite throughout the workday. In the 2022 Bureau of Land Management BMP Guide for Water Quality, AQ12 through AQ24 provide details on general best practices for the following 3 components of water drafting presented in this training, including source evaluation, access and approach construction, and drafting operations. The 2011 U.S. Forest Service Water Quality Management Handbook provides a few pages dedicated to water drafting site development. This information can be found in Section 12.21, now titled BMP 2.5. The topics are location and development, drafting operations, and approaches and drafting paths. In the 2012 U.S. Forest Service National Core BMP Guide, water uses 3 through 6 provide general best practices to avoid, minimize, and mitigate common water quality impacts associated with surface water diversion and use. These include water uses 3, active surface water drafting, water uses 4, diversion and conveyance, water uses 5, dams and impoundments, and water uses 6, dam removal. Temporary water drafting can rapidly destroy fish-bearing and non-fish-bearing aquatic species and surrounding habitat. The following publications help guide the selection, placement, and operation of water drafting equipment to prevent fish entrainment or the movement of aquatic organisms along with passive flow diversion. The U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service published separate fish screening specification documents in 1996, 1997, 2001, and 2008. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation published a pocket guide in 2014. On this page, you will find a few examples of the type of material found in the National Marine Fisheries Service screening criteria publications, including intake screens, intake mesh materials, and location or placement. Click each title for more information. This section details water source types and volume measurements. This section identifies 4 different water sources that may be evaluated on-site and recommendations specific to each feature. The water sources are natural flowing watercourses, natural standing ponds, natural springs, and in-stream dams. For all types, water drafting operations should prioritize the preservation of natural watercourses as closely as possible. Natural watercourses are the most common and visible water source, but carry the greatest potential impact to wildlife and water quality. Developing new access roads and drafting paths in the vicinity of continuously flowing watercourses should be avoided. When possible, locate the water drafting source on existing hardened and protected surfaces and reduce or eliminate new development. When planning new development, place all access roads and draft paths outside the high water line and harden the surfaces to protect from erosion. Minimize the overall footprint of the development wherever possible. Lakes, ponds, and pools of standing water are greatly preferred over continuously flowing water due to the reduced risk of sediment transport during a leak or failure event at the intake site. However, natural standing water sources are generally located at the lowest point in the vicinity, so locating development downslope or downstream from the feature can be challenging. Careful consideration and placement of water drafting features are needed to ensure accidents and impacts at the drafting site do not flow down into the water source itself. Design considerations specific to different configurations are detailed in later sections. Natural springs and downstream watercourses may appear to behave the same as Class 1 and Class 2 streams. Locate the extraction site sufficiently far enough downstream from the spring site so that drafting activities don't compact the area around the spring. Avoid new road or equipment traffic upslope from the spring site to avoid compaction of the water-bearing area like an aquifer and reduction of spring flows downstream. Similarly, the water storage should be downstream from the spring and use gravity flows to avoid pumping wherever possible. When natural flowing watercourses and springs are too shallow or too rough to draft reliable volumes of water, natural or constructed impoundments may provide the benefits of natural standing ponds. Temporary impoundments should consider water quality parameters and flows during operation and downstream impacts during removal. Different water drafting configurations can impact the same water feature in vastly different ways. This section identifies 6 common configurations and the regulatory guidance on best practices for each. Consider each junction or transfer point and each conveyance of the diversion, from intake to outflow. Design the entire system to account for both the design flow of the system and drainage flows from the surrounding area. Conveyances should be contained, enclosed, or armored to prevent erosion and degradation from large flow volumes, and maintain enough freeboard to accommodate flood and debris flows. Protective measures should be implemented at each junction along the entire length of the diversion to reduce sediment loading, such as preservation of vegetation on natural surfaces, sediment and debris barriers, and regular maintenance to remove sediment buildup. Click each image to learn more about each of the water drafting configurations. Smaller watercourses may have insufficient flow, either depth or volume, to allow for drafting directly from the watercourse. These streams may contain natural collection points, eddies, or log dams that serve as an impoundment and allow for collection of the stored volume. This drafting type can directly impact aquatic species and water quality. Proposed artificial impoundments may trigger additional permit requirements and require an assessment of potential impacts on wildlife beyond just the extraction of the water. Introducing an impoundment may scour the channel bed at the outflow point. Locate the weir in a hardened segment of the watercourse, or install rock armor at the outflow/overflow point to prevent scouring. Drafting water does not need to be sourced from flowing watercourses. Springs, seeps, ponds, and natural low points in the landscape may support standing water sources, which provide a collection point for water drafting. Standing water sources may also eliminate the need for access roads. Standing water sources may not have a readily visible inflow, but they still have the potential to support fish or non-fish aquatic species. Thus, standing water sources require the same assessment and protective practices as required for flowing water sources. Overdrafting can rapidly deplete a standing water body that may not receive inflow to replace that volume for months. Conversely, if no previous drainage improvements are in place, drafting may introduce large flow volumes. These impacts are preventable. Properly assess each water source and allowable extraction volume before commencing drafting operations. Drafting site designs should include overflow and downslope drainage improvements. Non-potable water storage tanks can be used instead of surface storage or ground storage of water sources. Tanks generally present a greater expense to install and maintain, but they provide greater reliability, a smaller footprint on the landscape, and eliminate water losses to evaporation and infiltration. Tanks can be sited to optimize the drafting pad location, avoid runoff to watercourses, and minimize effort to load water tenders. In this image, a storage tank was constructed on a ridge, surrounded by preserved existing vegetation, and far from a riparian area. This eliminates the need for additional perimeter BMPs. Watercourses with sufficient flow volume and depth may allow for drafting directly from the channel without any modifications to the channel itself. This drafting type can directly impact aquatic species and water quality. This drafting type may still require the development of an access road and drafting pad. Water drafting intake pipes can cause erosion or displacement of natural channel bed material. Locate the intake in a hardened segment of the channel or install an artificial protective surface to separate the intake from the channel bed. When no natural depressions along a watercourse are available, constructing an off-channel basin for water drafting allows a project operator to select the optimal draft site to minimize impacts to the watercourse and surrounding areas. In this image, the storage pond site has been constructed within an accessible distance of an existing roadway. When sited properly, off-channel storage eliminates the need for access roads. Road fills and embankments can be used as artificial impoundments to minimize impacts on watercourses and reduce road miles required in general. When artificial features fail, they may introduce large flow volumes where there are no previous drainage improvements. Off-channel basin design should include overflow and downslope drainage improvements. In locations prone to wildfire and vandalism, underground tanks present the same advantages as an above-ground tank with reduced exposure of a high-valued exposed surface feature. Water drafting requires documentation of instantaneous flow rate to ensure adequate protection of aquatic species during drafting and document compliance with instantaneous rates and overall flow reduction allowances. Unit 6 detailed 3 methods to calculate estimated flows: rational, flow transference, magnitude, and frequency. The USGS Survey Techniques and Methods book provides thorough detail on various mobile and stationary measurement apparatuses to physically measure flowing water volume. Flow measurement data collection and quality control should be planned, performed, supervised, and evaluated by qualified hydrology professionals following the requirements of the federal Nonpoint source order. This section details drafting site approaches and drafting pad design. Depending on the pumping or capacity of the diversion system available, drafting pad siting should prioritize minimizing the impact on the watercourse. Drafting pads should be sited downslope from the watercourse. Erosion protection, consisting of a vegetated buffer, artificial erosion control, or both, should maintain a buffer between the drafting pad and the watercourse. Prioritize off-channel reservoirs, side channels, and naturally deep pool sections of a watercourse when possible. Seek hydrologically disconnected draft sites. The dimensions of the drafting pad will vary greatly depending on the volume drafted and the tenders utilized for the operation. Drafting pads should be planned and designed for the water tenders specified in the proposed activity, not for long-term parking or equipment storage. The intent of the drafting pad is for temporary parking while loading tenders only. Access approaches should be constructed perpendicular to the watercourse, while the intake screen should be parallel to the flow. The drafting pad should be located outside of the bank fill elevation, ensuring flood flows do not impact drafting activities. Drafting pads should be graded such that drainage avoids sediment discharge. When possible, designers should cite drafting locations that can be accessed by existing roads. Using existing roads eliminates the need for access roads and approaches. Similarly, using bridges or other pads with impermeable surfaces for the drafting pad eliminates the need for additional land development and the ensuing planning and design. The roadway approach to a drafting pad is still a road and requires the same level of planning, design, and maintenance of a regularly trafficked road. Due to the considerable weight of a loaded water truck or tank trailer, the compressive strength of the roadway subbase and surface course requires consideration, even for short-duration drafting operations. As detailed in Units 6 and 7, roads should be graded to minimize erosion and sedimentation. Ingress, staging, turnaround, and egress are all included in traffic management design. Water trucks and tank trailers present different axle weights and turning radii, and both require consideration when siting the drafting pad. Additionally, the planning and design should quantify vehicles and anticipated trips per day to ensure vehicles do not restrict each other's travel on the access road. The drafting pad and access road should ideally be located downslope from the water source to eliminate the risk of impacting the source. If any improvements are proposed upslope from the water source, the design should include protective measures at the drafting pad during fill and along the access road for recently filled trucks exiting the drafting site. Similar to drainage infrastructure, storage tank overflow and return pipes should be constructed of durable materials, and all outflows should be armored against erosion impacts. Vehicles should not have access to enter water courses. When no natural barriers are present, the design should include a physical barrier, such as brow logs between the roadway or drafting pad and any adjacent water source. This section details best practices to follow during drafting operations. Jurisdictional requirements may vary depending on the existing conditions of a watercourse, such as flow volume, existing diversion structures, and the aquatic species and age range present in a source water body. Any surface water source, including flowing and standing, should assume the most stringent aquatic protection level until a proper biological evaluation and appropriate protective measures are recommended. When fish or non-fish aquatic species are present and the intake structures are not properly installed and protected, aquatic species can be entrained or carried along with the flow of water into the diversion system, potentially killing the wildlife. Proper design should consider placement, configuration, and components of the intake structure itself, such as fish screens and pump settings. Aquatic species and vegetation should be considered when quantifying allowable drafting volumes. Continuous surface flow to downstream reaches should be maintained, avoiding isolating ponds or riffles below the drafting location. The Bureau of Land Management's 2022 Water BMP Guidebook specifies withdrawal maximums at 10% for ESA listed or rare species habitat, 20% for fish-bearing streams, and 40% for all other surface water features, which can be used for general planning until a site-specific quantity is formally determined. Water drafting basins or inlet sites and storm drainage should be kept separate. Culvert inlet bays are not recommended for drafting basins. Excavations or impacts to surface water features may require additional permits and extensive additional wildlife protection measures. Place the drafting intake on a hard surface, not a soft substrate along a creek bed. Place a temporary liner below the intake pipe to protect the natural channel bed. If the intake pipes are left for multiple drafting operations, block the pipe when demobilizing to ensure no inadvertent drafting occurs. Equipment, vehicles, and mobile trailers generally present the greatest risk to water quality due to the volume of pollutants contained in various automotive fluids. As automobiles drive through a watershed, any leaking fluids can be spread miles along the roadway. Keep truck traffic to a minimum and keep access approaches high, dry, and armored against erosion. Maintain complete spill kits on every truck utilized for water drafting. Inspect trucks daily for leaks. Contain and dispose of any leaks, spills, and used absorbent materials properly. Unanticipated water spills and leaks along the conveyance system can cause erosion, sediment delivery to watercourses, or even undercutting of the structure or ground supporting the conveyance itself, causing full failure of the system. The entire water conveyance system should be inspected and maintained regularly during operation, both to repair leaks and minimize volumes of spills. Pipes, ditches, culverts, pumps, couplings, impoundments, tanks, etc. can each strain their neighboring components. Overflow protections should be planned and structured similarly to, and potentially co-located with, outflow locations. Drafting pads should be leveled as much as possible to ensure tanks are filled to capacity and increase operational efficiency in general. Truck and tank filling should be continuously monitored to avoid overflow events entirely. The tank filling pad itself should be hardened and cross-sloped to accommodate heavy-duty truck and trailer traffic with tight turning radius and regular concentrated surface flows. Operators should anticipate any surface downslope from the drafting pad will receive sheet flow runoff and stabilize the slopes prior to commencement of drafting. This section details impacts to watercourses and best management practices to avoid these impacts. If insufficient materials are available to restore and protect an eroded surface, the response time increases significantly, and the volume of erosion itself can worsen before more materials are delivered, potentially delivering sediment downslope. Stockpiling erosion control materials on site and training crews on installation practices before an event will ensure timely corrective actions. Erosion leads to sediment loading at discharge points, or where runoff leaves your site. Sediment has a direct impact on water quality. Place sediment removal BMPs at discharge points to reduce or eliminate sediment from leaving your site. When drafting pads and access roads are hydrologically connected, precipitation and overflowing accidents may deliver unanticipated sediment directly to watercourses downslope. Design roads and drafting pads to be hydrologically disconnected from watercourses. In the event that surface flows occur in these areas, the hydrologic disconnection will reduce sediment load. New temporary developments may not include the import of expensive surface hardening materials. Unanticipated runoff from leaks and overflows can rapidly cause rutting, mud pits, and erosion of the drafting pad itself when new developments operate on unconditioned, erodible soils such as silt. Properly condition or surface roads and pads, and regularly inspect project sites to avoid the snowball effect of erosion. When a diversion operation is not inspected regularly or does not have protective measures staged on site, new surface flows may occur in unprotected locations and rapidly erode a slope or even impact the conveyance itself. Preparing response actions in advance and regularly inspecting diversion conveyances will ensure leaks are caught early and operators are prepared to respond. When equipment spills and leaks are not observed or caught quickly, leaks can be spread across long distances, including near watercourses. Spills and leaks from equipment and vehicles, such as fuels and oils, can pollute vast quantities of surface water much faster than sediment loading. Regularly inspecting all vehicles and equipment for leaks will ensure they are caught early and minimize spill volumes. In rural locations, where sites receive infrequent truck traffic, operators can keep a spill and leak kit on board at least one vehicle at each site to ensure all crews are prepared for a spill or leak event. Any fluids that can impact water quality, such as fuels, oils, and chemicals, should be stored in secondary containment.